Chapter 144. In the past 18 years of Lu Buwang's life, he had never interacted with a woman except for his little junior sister. Even his little junior sister was gentle and polite. He had never seen such a fierce weirdo. His senior brothers said that he was pure and honest, which was true. He put on airs, but he was repeatedly helpless against Mu Hongjin. He couldn't get rid of Mu Hongjin, so he thought that he would wait until he finished his business and then take her to Qian Mountain. As for how to deal with her, he would let Taoist Yunji decide. Suddenly, there was a gentle and soft girl beside him, which made Lu Buwang very uncomfortable. But soon, this discomfort was diluted by anger. Mu Hongjin wasn't like what she said, "I don't eat much, and I won't spend much of your money. I won't be a problem if you take me with you." Mu Hongjin indeed didn't eat much, but she spent a lot of money. She was too picky. She had to choose the best restaurant to eat, dress beautifully, and live in an inn. Fortunately, she had her own money, which was very rich, so she could afford it. Not only that, but she also shared it with him generously. "Young hero, the roast duck of Wu Fang Lu is really delicious. Try some." Lu Buwang frowned and looked at her. "Didn't you say that you were abducted? How can you have so much money on you? When the abductor abducted you, he must have been so kind that he didn't search you, right?" Mu Hongjin was stunned and said apologetically, "You found out." "Well, in fact, I wasn't abducted here. She leaned close to Lu Buwang and whispered in his ear, "I ran away from my marriage." Lu Buwang looked at her in surprise. "It's true. I didn't lie to you. My father wants to marry me to an old man who is older than him. Look at me. I'm so young and beautiful. How can I marry into a tiger's den? I heard that the man is a pervert. He had married 3 wives before, but they were all tortured to death by him. I had no choice." She pretended to cry and covered her face with her sleeve. "I just didn't want to die so miserably." Lu Buwang was skeptical. "Nonsense. Since you have so much money on you, it can be seen that your family background is not bad. Why did your father marry you to such a person? That person's family background is even bigger than ours." Mu Hongjin said aggrievedly, "Don't you know that the higher the official's rank, the higher the official's rank? He took a fancy to me and wanted me to be his wife. My father had no choice. But I didn't want to. I escaped in the middle of the night. If they caught me, I would be dead. So, young hero, please don't leave me behind." Lu Buwang said angrily, "I'm not your husband." She made it sound as if he had abandoned her. They were strangers he had met by chance. If her family really found Mu Hongjin and they wanted to take her away, what reason did he have to stop them? "That won't do." Mu Hongjin grabbed his hand. "You saved me, so you should be responsible for me. If you leave me behind halfway, I'll die sooner or later. It's better to die now. Come on." She snatched the long sword from Lu Buwang's waist and put it on the table. She looked at Lu Buwang and said aggressively, "It's better to die under your sword than to be tortured by that bastard. Young hero, kill me." There were people coming and going around. When some people saw them like this, they all pointed at them. Lu Buwang immediately blushed and said angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? If you don't promise to protect me all the time, I'll always be like this." The young man was instantly overwhelmed. How could there be such an unreasonable woman in the world? However, she had said everything, and he couldn't even refute her. After a while, he was defeated. He gritted his teeth and said, "I promise you. Forget it. It would only take more than a month to gain experience at the foot of the mountain. After more than a month, he would take her back to Qian Mountain." Taoist Yunji had his own way. At that time, no matter how arrogant this woman was, they wouldn't meet again. Hearing this, Mu Hongjin immediately smiled. She suddenly approached him, looked at his face, and said, "Actually, there is another way. As long as I get married now, that rotten old man won't be able to do anything to me." I see that you're handsome and your swordsmanship is outstanding. You're even better than that person. Why don't you marry me and we'll both be happy? The girl smiled lightly, and her eyes were as moist as a mountain stream, clearly reflecting his figure. The young man in white was startled. He jumped up as if he had been bitten by a snake and reprimanded, "Who wants to be happy with you?" "Oh." Mu Hongjin spread out her hands regretfully. "That's a pity. That's a pity." Suddenly, there was a clang sound beside his hand, and he came back to his senses. He didn't know when his fingertips had accidentally touched the strings on the table, shattering his memories. He was stunned for a moment, and the clear and cunning voice of the girl back then seemed to appear in his mind. She kept calling him young hero, which made him impatient and upset. After a while, Lu Buwang lowered his head and smiled faintly. They were all gone and couldn't be chased. It was just adding to his sadness. He Yen also had something on his mind because he met Mu Hongjin in the prince's mansion during the day. That night, he didn't sleep well. He tossed and turned in bed and didn't fall asleep until the middle of the night. Fortunately, he didn't wake up Xiao Ju. Because he slept late at night, he woke up a little later the next day. When he woke up, he didn't see Xiao Ju. Hung Xiao smiled and said, "Young master went out early in the morning and told me not to wake madam up." He Yen said, "Oh," and asked Hung Xiao, "Did he say where he was going?" Hung Xiao shook her head. He Yen got up and washed up. After eating, he walked to the courtyard and saw Lu Buwang making tea. Lin Shuanghe was sitting on the side and admiring. "Master." He Yen went over and called. He. Lu Buwang smiled and said, "Do you want to drink tea?" "No." He Yen waved his hand repeatedly. Lu Buwang's skill in making tea looked quite intimidating, but the tea he made had always been very bitter, similar to medicine. Although she wasn't afraid of suffering, she wasn't someone who would ask for it. She immediately said, "I'm going out for a walk." "You guys continue." He Yen smiled and walked away. When she arrived at Jiang, if it wasn't for something, her days would be very boring. If it was in the past, she would have practiced martial arts to strengthen her body on such a good morning and good weather. Unfortunately, she was wearing women's clothes now, so it wasn't convenient for her to do this. She was even more afraid of being exposed. After thinking about it, she could only give up. While she was regretting, Cui Jiao hurried over and said, "Madam, a guest is here." "If there's a guest, then so be it." He Yen was puzzled. What does it have to do with me? She wasn't the owner of the Cui mansion. She was obviously a guest. Even if there was a guest, it wasn't He Yan's turn to welcome her. "No." Cui Jiao carefully looked at her face. "You know this guest. She's the daughter of Ling Dianyi from the Debois Hall. She came to the mansion today and said that she came to have fun with you." He Yen was puzzled. Ling Xiu. Was she very close to Ling Xiu? They didn't even talk much. Their relationship wasn't close enough for them to visit each other, right? "Madam, do you want to go and take a look?" He Yen sighed. She had already come to the house. How could he close the door and not meet her? Forget it. He would just go and meet her for a while and see what she was up to. In the small garden, several young girls were sitting together. They were all dressed up and were beautiful. They were even more beautiful than the spring scenery in the garden. They were chattering and laughing, and their voices were like orioles. Just looking at them was really pleasing to the eye. Concubine Wei stood in the corridor and wrung her handkerchief angrily. She said, "These people are really too much. They're bullying our Yuyan." Second concubine Wei was putting nail polish on her fingers. The bright red color of the nail polish made her fingers look especially slender and white. It can't be helped. Who told young Master Chow to be so handsome? Our Jiang hasn't had such a person for many years. His age is just right. If I were 10 years younger, I would also give it a try. Try my ass. Concubine Wei was so anxious that she cursed. Be careful or I'll tell master. Good sister, I was just saying. Why did you take it seriously? Second concubine Wei laughed. She carefully looked at the nail polish on her fingers under the sunlight. There are so many wolves chasing after a piece of meat. I'm too lazy to deal with them. Miss Yuyan is so pitiful. Third concubine Wei liked to be sad. She covered her heart with her handkerchief and sighed with a frown. She said with some empathy, so many people have their eyes on her as soon as she arrived in Jiang. If she continues to stay in Jiang in the future, will her days be good? Although she is young and beautiful now, if other women were to appear in front of young Master Qiao every day, how long would young Master Qiao be able to last? A man's true feelings are too easily changed. They can't withstand a few words from a vixen. Who are you scolding? Second concubine Wei glanced at her. Do you dare to say that in front of master? Third concubine Wei pretended not to hear her and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. Fourth concubine Wei was the youngest and used to be a street performer. She always laughed heartlessly and asked while eating melon seeds, that depends on whether young Master Qiao likes his wife or not. I quite like Miss Yuyan. She doesn't have the delicate air of a young miss. Last time, she even helped my servant carry the bucket. It was the first time I saw a master helping a servant. How nice. That's terrible. Third concubine Wei made a fuss over nothing. Men all like gentle and timid girls. Carrying a bucket. She didn't let others look down on her and think that she was born to be treated carelessly. Fourth concubine Wei was dissatisfied and spat out the melon seed in her mouth. What do you mean look down on me? I used to be a street performer and carried 5 water vats at a time. Master still liked me very much. What gentle and timid. Master didn't have the patience to deal with someone like you who would have a headache and fever every few days. Enough, stop arguing. Concubine Wei's head hurt from their argument and she reprimanded them. We are talking about Miss Yuyan now. In any case, she is quite miserable. Third concubine Wei muttered. You see, Miss Ling isn't easy to deal with. The other girls aren't that easy to deal with either. Young Master Qiao is born beautiful, but he treats people very coldly. I don't think he cares much about Miss Yuyan. Sooner or later, something will happen. Third younger sister. Second concubine Wei glanced at third concubine Wei. Do you know why you are the least favored among the 4 of us? It's because you don't have good taste. Third concubine Wei glared at her angrily. Tears welled up in her eyes and she looked like she was about to cry again. That young Master Qiao's temperament is indeed cold and he doesn't seem to care much about Madame Qiao. I don't know why. Perhaps there were no feelings before marriage. However, from his behavior these past few days, it's clear that he likes Madame Qiao. Ordinary people's love isn't a big deal, but this kind of person's love is. There is a kind of person who is unmoved, but once he is moved, there is only one person in his eyes. Second concubine Wei raised her finger and smiled like a vixen imparting her experience. No matter how many other girls are beautiful, they are all in vain in his eyes. Qiao Huanqing is this kind of person. When these words came out, everyone was silent for a moment. This kind of man was probably what women yearned for. For a moment, they were speechless. After a long while, concubine Wei opened her mouth and asked, Do you mean that we don't have to help? Help what? Second concubine Wei smiled carelessly. That Qiao Huanqing is very protective. Why don't we make a bet? I'm afraid that when Yu Yan's husband will stand up for her before she is in trouble. When He Yan arrived at the small garden, a gust of fragrant wind hit him in the face and he almost fainted from the smell. He didn't know why the women of Jiang liked to wear fragrant pouches so much. It was fine if it was just one person, but when many people crowded together, it was like a cloud of powder. For a moment, He Yan missed Xiaoju's moon qilin fragrance very much. It was faint and light. It was just right. Madame Qiao is here. Ling Xiu stood up and smiled at her. He Yan didn't know any of these girls except for Ling Xiu and Yan Min. He thought for a moment and said, I heard that Miss Ling specially came to see me. You don't have to be so serious. Ling Xiu smiled and said, it's just that today's weather is good and we have nothing to do. We are sitting together and chatting. We thought that since Madame Chiao is here, we might as well go together. Madame Chiao won't find us disturbing, right? I won't. He Yan smiled and snorted in her heart. Even though she wasn't sensitive to women's affairs, she could tell that this group of people had ulterior motives. They weren't here to see her. They were clearly here to see Xiaoju. As expected, Ling Xiu's next sentence was, why don't I see young Master Chiao? My husband went out early in the morning. He Yan smiled very amiably. He might not be back until late at night. What right did they have to see him whenever they wanted? He was the commander-in-chief of the Right Corps of Dawei. Of course, he couldn't just let anyone see him. If he didn't allow them to see him, then he didn't allow them to see him. When Ling Xiu and the girls behind her heard this, they instantly looked disappointed. He Yan smiled and said, didn't Miss Ling specially come to see me? Why, you're not joking, right? How can that be? Ling Xiu regained her senses and affectionately pulled He Yan's hand and sat down at the stone table in the courtyard. Quickly, sit down. My father and official Chui have a very good relationship. In the past, I often came to the Chui residence to play. However, I never had a sister and it was rather lonely. It's good that Madame Chiao is here. In the future, when Ah Xiu comes to the Chui residence again, I don't have to worry about not having someone to talk to. He Yan thought to herself, how is this looking for a sister? She's obviously here to see a handsome man. Xiaoju should come and see what she meant by being more serious and deceiving than her. He Yan sat down in front of the stone table. To be honest, she didn't know these people at all and didn't know what to say. She just casually picked up some fruits to eat and planned to sit here as a decoration and listen to them talk. Unfortunately, since the other party was here for Xiaoju, and Xiaoju wasn't here, this madam couldn't possibly be spared. As they spoke, the topic of conversation landed on He Yan. I heard that Madame Chiao is a famous talented woman in Hu province. Previously, I really wanted to hear Madame Chiao play the guqin. Unfortunately, I was stopped by Sir Chiao in the end. Now that I think about it, I feel regretful, Ling Xiu said with a smile. He Yan smiled and said, what's there to feel regretful about? Didn't my husband also play a piece? But Sir Chiao said that his guqin skills weren't even 1/10 of Madame's. Ling Xiu stared into He Yan's eyes. It's really hard to imagine. Yes, it was really hard to imagine. He Yan thought to herself, Xiaoju's lie was a little too exaggerated. Now that she heard it from someone else, she felt embarrassed. My husband's praise is a little too much. He Yan poured herself a cup of tea and took a sip. My guqin skills are about the same as his. If you listen to him, it's equivalent to listening to me. How can that be? Ling Xiu obviously didn't plan to let her off so easily. In Jiang, we admire talented people the most. Since Madame has the talent to swallow the phoenix, you shouldn't hide it. The weather is good today. Why don't we pick up some poems here? Firstly, it's interesting. Secondly, we can see Madame's talent. Here it comes, here it comes. He Yan was annoyed. Why did Ling Xiu ask him to either play the guqin or compose poems? Did she have to play chess or write calligraphy if she said that she didn't know how to compose poems? He Yan thought to himself, even if this lady is attracted by Xiaoju's appearance and admires her, she should be targeting Xiaoju. For example, she should be showing off her skills in front of Xiaoju. Why is she making things difficult for me? Is it possible that Xiaoju will like anyone who makes things difficult for me? Once was fine, but every time was the same. He Yan didn't want to play this kind of game with them anymore. He only smiled and said, today, I don't want to compose a poem, nor do I want to play chess. Of course, I definitely won't play the zither. There was no room for negotiation at all. He directly rejected Ling Xiu. No matter how clever Ling Xiu was, she didn't expect He Yan to say that. After a while, Yan Min, who had been silent all this time, snorted and mocked. It said that women in the Central Plains are graceful and polite. I think Madame Chiao's way of speaking is like our Miss Jiang. Very straightforward. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. He Yan smiled. Madame Chiao, are you looking down on us? Ling Xiu lowered her head and asked uneasily. It's not that I'm looking down on you, He Yan said doubtfully, it's just that I don't want to today. Didn't you say that Miss Ling is a talented lady? Why can't you understand a simple sentence? Is it difficult to understand what I said? He Yan would have asked them to come out and fight if they were men looking for trouble today. However, it was not good for a woman to do such ungentlemanly things. After thinking about it, she decided that it would be better to use the title of evil Rakshasa to make these ladies understand that she was not to be trifled with. After being frightened, they would naturally not come to her door and ask her to play the guqin, chess, calligraphy, and painting again. Ling Xiu looked at her in a daze and did not say anything. When the other ladies saw this, they were dissatisfied with He Yan. It was probably because Ling Xiu was very prestigious among them. When Ling Xiu was wronged, all of them wanted to stand up for her. A lady with a slightly louder voice said, Madame Chiao refuses to do this and refuses to do that. Could it be that she doesn't know how to play the guqin? The so-called title of a talented lady doesn't live up to its name. That's why she shirks it every time. How is that possible? Another lady seemed to be deliberately playing along with her. She said in surprise, that young Master Chiao is not an ordinary person. He plays the guqin so well. It's obvious that he's an elegant person. He was already very wealthy in the past. Now that he's acknowledged his ancestors, he'll be a person of status in Jiang sooner or later. I heard that Madame Chiao is also from an ordinary family. If she doesn't have any special skills, what does young Master Chiao like about her? Yan Min, smiled insincerely and said, beauty. Speaking of which, Madame Chiao's skin is as white as jade. She's as beautiful as the moon. She emphasized the word skin as white as jade. He Yan was speechless. She seemed to be talking about Xiaoju. How could she be blamed for that? What kind of logic was that? Beautiful as the moon. There are so many beautiful ladies in Jiang. Isn't Xiu beautiful? She comes from a good family, has a gentle personality, and is brimming with talent. If that's the case, Xiu is the one who's compatible with young Master Chiao. Don't talk nonsense, Ling Xiu said with reddened eyes. He Yan had finally experienced how bold Miss Ji Yang was and how direct she was with her words. But what did they mean by this? Ling Xiu was a pure and innocent lady. Xiaoju was now a married man. Did they want her to be Xiaoju's concubine? Or did they want her to step down to make way for Ling Xiu? Was there something wrong with her brain? We didn't say anything wrong. Madame Chiao, you won't be liked by your husband sooner or later. The lady with the loudest voice laughed and said, Madame Chiao, please don't blame us for not being nice with our words. We're only saying this because we treat you as our own. Don't treat us as outsiders. Oh, since they couldn't do it openly, they were trying to sow discord. He Yan had been with Xiaoju for a long time and had learned a thing or two about his ability to scold people without using any vulgarities. He immediately shook his head and smiled sweetly. Don't treat us as outsiders, don't treat us as outsiders. I know that all of you have good intentions. However, you're worrying too much. My husband treats me very well. Even if I don't know how to play the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, he wouldn't blame me at all, let alone if I didn't know how to play the zither. I have a bad temper, and I get angry and ignore people easily. My husband, on the other hand, would always be patient and coax me. He would cook noodles for me and take me to buy noodles. He would remember every word I said. He even remembers things like menstruation better than I do. He Yan glanced at Ling Xiu and saw that Ling Xiu's expression was not good. He felt proud and spouted more nonsense. What's so difficult about learning the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting? When I'm unhappy, my husband will use his skills to make me happy. What you've seen is just the tip of the iceberg. There are many more that you haven't seen. Outside the courtyard, Xiaoju had not reached the garden. She had just turned the corner when she heard He Yan's pretentious sigh. He used a disgusting and sickening tone to speak. Sigh, such an outstanding and unreasonable man only dotes on me. He can't tolerate anyone else in his eyes. What can I do? Chapter 145. Fei Nu, who was behind her, was speechless. Xiaoju felt her eyebrows twitching. She had just returned to the Cui residence and had not had time to change her clothes when she heard from Cui Jiao that He Yan was dragged to the small garden by Ling Xiu. She knew what a woman like Ling Xiu was up to. However, He Yan did not know anything about women. She thought about it and decided to put out the fire first because she was afraid that Ling Xiu would be taken advantage of. Who knew that as soon as she arrived, she would see Ling Xiu so proud of herself and did not seem to be taken advantage of. The other women were so angry that their faces turned green. She wasn't too stupid. Xiaoju was both angry and amused, so she didn't go forward. She simply stood at the corner of the garden and looked at her coldly. She wanted to hear what other shocking crazy things this person could say. On the other side, Second Yin Yang showed a knowing smile. She pointed at the figure at the corner of the garden and said, "Look, someone is here to protect her." It's true. Fourth Yin Yang clenched her fists and said, "Second sister, you are so good at judging people. I admire you. It's hard to say who he will help." Third Yin Yang was not satisfied with her wrong judgment and said, "What if Qiao Gongzi sees Ling Xiu's beauty and changes sides?" Yin Yang Wei frowned and said, "If you don't know how to speak, then don't speak." Second Yin Yang laughed in schadenfreude. On the other side, He Yan was still speaking with assurance. "That's why I said to my sisters, you must learn the 4 arts of zither, chess, calligraphy and painting. However, you must learn them to make yourself happy. If you only want to make a man like you, then you should learn how to control your husband." Before I was married, I was also very fond of romance. However, after I got married, I felt that everything was just fleeting clouds in the valley. Only the trick of controlling a husband is truly powerful. Really? This group of girls was not too old. Although they were a little annoying at times, they were not so scheming. Since they could write their thoughts on their faces, they were naturally not scheming. One of the girls asked, "Then tell us, what is your secret to controlling your husband?" He Yan coughed and said seriously, "I am ashamed to say that I do not know what my technique of controlling my husband is. Back then, I only met my husband once at the Lantern Festival. I didn't even know him. The next day, he came to propose marriage and said that he would marry no one but me. Actually, I didn't want to get married so early, but he was so infatuated that he told me he wouldn't marry anyone but me. If I didn't agree to marry him, he would commit suicide by jumping into the river. I thought that since it was a human life, I might as well do a good deed. Moreover, you also know a saying, a strong woman is afraid of a pestering man. He kept pestering me, so I married him. I've thought about it. There's only one trick to controlling a husband. First of all, you have to have a face that can make people infatuated at first sight and want to marry no one else but you." She combed her long hair that hung in front of her chest and said somewhat embarrassedly, "Of course, this is not something that everyone can do. Secondly, you must like him less than he likes you." Men and women were generally evenly matched. In small matters, there would always be someone who had the upper hand and someone who was at a disadvantage. This is just like fighting a war. It's not a good thing to always place too much importance on your lover. If you treat yourself well, there will naturally be someone who will love you. He Yan made up such nonsense that she almost believed herself. I've never fawned on my husband, but he doted on me like a pearl or a treasure. This is the result. Thirdly, He Yen said in her heart, I can't make up the third one. She smiled slightly, good people are rare. Everyone has to open their eyes and look carefully. Rather than staring at someone else's, it's better to open your eyes and raise a new one. Fei Nu secretly glanced at her master. Second young master Xiao was leaning against the wall. His smile was slightly cold and his eyes were filled with ridicule. Fei Nu thought, this lady he said something about a strong woman being afraid of a pestering man. Their young master is a pestering man. And he kept pestering her. He really knew how to flatter himself. Second Yin Yang stopped cracking melon seeds and stared at He Yen. She said in surprise, so it was me who made a mistake. I thought he was someone who didn't know about the inner courtyard. I didn't expect him to be an expert. Wonderful. Although I don't quite understand what she said, Fourth Yin Yang scratched her head, it sounds very impressive. He Yan's heart calmed down a little. He felt that since he was reborn, he had seen a lot of the world with Xiao Ju. He had even learned a lot about talking to people and talking to ghosts. Of course, this nonsense right now was enough to scare these little girls into a daze. However, in a group of people, there were always one or two who were not easy to fool. Yen Min looked at her and said sarcastically, do you really think that people will believe what you said? Young Master Qiao dotes on someone. And pesters you. Does young Master Qiao look like this kind of person? When she said this, the few young ladies who were still in a daze recalled Xiao Huanqing's cold appearance and immediately became clear-headed. No matter how they looked at it, Xiao Huanqing didn't look like the kind of person who would pester Wen Yuyan. You must be lying. The loud-voiced young lady said. I'm not. He Yen was very sincere, our relationship as husband and wife is very good, so good that it's beyond your imagination. Just a few days ago, during the Water God Festival, we even walked on Lover's Bridge. I'm afraid of heights and didn't want to go at first. However, when my husband heard that people who cross the bridge together will not be separated for the rest of their lives, he forcefully carried me over. If I hadn't sternly refused, he might have had to walk on it 3 times, destined for 3 lifetimes. Xiao Ju, he couldn't bear to continue listening. He only felt that it was inconceivable. How could there be such a person in the world who could tell such a lie without blushing or panting? She was so serious that it made one's hair stand on end. What's wrong with that? The young lady at the side was unconvinced. So many people walk on Lover's Bridge, we even look at pictures together, He Yen said. Ling Xiu didn't understand, what pictures? Spring, before she finished speaking, a light cough was heard. Everyone turned to look and saw a young man slowly walking over. He was so elegant that he could be in a painting and was as handsome as jade. It wasn't the first time they had seen him, but every time they saw him, they couldn't help but be mesmerized by this person's appearance and praise him in their hearts. When he passed by He Yen, his beautiful eyes fell on He Yen, revealing a hint of warning. He Yen also forgot what he was talking about. Just as he was about to speak, he heard Xiao Ju say faintly, Yen Yen, what are you doing here? Yen Yen? Ling Xiu was stunned. It wasn't uncommon for couples to call each other Xiao, but it was always done in private. In front of everyone, unless their love was so strong that they didn't have any taboos. He Yan's breath was stuck in his chest and he didn't know what to say. Although he knew that Xiao Ju was calling Wen Yuyan's Yen Yen, it was such a coincidence that she also had a Yen. Thinking about it this way, he seemed to be calling her Yen Yen. She replied blankly, just drinking tea and chatting. Xiao Ju nodded and stared at her with a pair of sparkling black eyes. He smiled slightly and said in a gentle voice that made her heart tremble, can you accompany me back to the room to sit? Sit for what? He Yen was extremely unaccustomed to him speaking like this. She only felt that the surrounding gazes were like knives, so, flying towards her. It was really depressing. Just now, she was here bragging about how favored she was, but in return, she only got a liar. Moreover, Xiao Ju didn't say much. He only put a gentle gaze on her, and she received so many jealous gazes. Who wouldn't say that second young Master Xiao was amazing? Play the zither with me. The young man's face was as beautiful as jade and his eyes were as bright as the stars. His hair was soft and cold, and it hung on his shoulders. He reached out and gently rubbed He Yan's hair. He really doted on her. The people around them wanted to push He Yan away and stuff their heads under the young man's hand. Oh, okay. He Yan composed herself and stood up. When she looked up again, she also had a shy expression. Sisters, I'm sorry. My husband wants me to go back and play the zither with him. She sighed again and said with annoyance, it's true that a fierce woman is afraid of a pestering man. He Yan turned around and leisurely walked away with Xiao Ju. The people behind them looked at each other. After a while, Ling Xiu flung her handkerchief, gritted her teeth and wiped her face. Yan Min was startled. What's wrong? Ling Xiu was so angry that she cried. The plate of melon seeds was empty. Fourth concubine clapped her hands and said with dissatisfaction, that's it? If you want to watch, go find a book. Concubine Wei rebuked, do you think young Master Qiao is here for you to watch a show? Don't say, this is much better than the show in the lovesickness class. Second concubine rested her chin on one hand, watching from afar. When young Master Qiao protected his wife, it was quite moving. Watching it made me want to. What are you thinking? Concubine Wei said, don't cause trouble for me. Good sister, I'm just saying. Second concubine smiled flirtatiously, at our age, even if we want to spend time with someone under the moonlight, there's no one to support us. Third concubine did not say any sour words, only muttering, Madam Qiao's luck is quite good to find such a husband. With this brain of yours, why do you only think that young Master Qiao is not bad? Fourth concubine rolled her eyes, I think that Madam Qiao is also an interesting person. If you were surrounded like that just now, you would have cried and jumped into the river. Look at her, what is called 4 tales of force against 1,000 caddies. The art of controlling a husband is not simple. You should learn more, third sister. At this moment, He Yan, who had the enviable art of controlling a husband, was on the way back to the courtyard with Xiao Ju. On the way back, He Yan did not dare to breathe loudly, nor did he raise his head to look at Xiao Ju. He did not say a single word. Without a doubt, since this person had appeared at that time, it was obvious that this person had not just arrived. It was possible that this person had been standing behind for a long time. The words that she had said to smear Xiao Ju's reputation had most likely been heard by Xiao Ju. It was all the fault of that group of girls who were too talkative. They were so noisy that she did not hear Xiao Ju's footsteps. She did not know what Xiao Ju was thinking right now, but she knew that he must be very angry. What should she do to appease his anger when she returned? Apologizing before he gets angry? Just as she was thinking, the courtyard was already in front of her. On the way back, He Yan and Xiao Ju saw Lin Shuanghe standing in the courtyard, talking to a servant girl. Lin Shuanghe, this lecher, said something to his new servant girl, which made her blush and laugh. When he raised his eyes, he saw that He Yan and Xiao Ju had returned. Lin Shuanghe greeted them, young master, young mistress is back. Where did you go? He Yan replied awkwardly, I drank some tea. Let's talk about it later. She followed Xiao Ju back to the room. As soon as she entered the room, she bumped into Xiao Ju and almost fell into his arms. Xiao Ju looked at her indifferently, reached over her body, and closed the door behind her. He Yan, sit. He turned around and sat down at the table. His calm tone made He Yan feel that he was denouncing him. He Yan quickly sat down in front of him. Why aren't you saying anything? Xiao Ju raised his eyebrows and looked at her with a faint smile, weren't you very talkative just now, fierce girl? He Yan was shocked. So he heard it. She said, Commander-in-Chief, you know that they come to find trouble with me every few days. I can't stand it, so it's just a temporary solution. Can I ask, when did you arrive, and how much did you hear of what I said? Xiao Ju sneered, what's the difference? The difference is in the content of my apology. Xiaoju stared at her for a while, then said, Lady He, do you not care about your own reputation, or do you not care about my reputation? I'm sorry, He Yan apologized sincerely, but I think, now that we are young Master Qiao and Miss Wen, it should be fine to make our relationship more intimate. After all, it's normal for husband and wife to be intimate. Xiaoju couldn't take it anymore. Are you talking about intimacy? Isn't it? If I didn't come over just now, what were you going to say? What did you and I look at? He was well educated and couldn't bring himself to say those two words. However, He Yan was obviously not as particular as him. He said straightforwardly, you're talking about the spring map. Xiaoju pinched her forehead, you don't have to say it so loudly. He Yan lowered his voice and asked doubtfully, we looked at the spring map together, which means that we have a very good relationship. What's wrong with that? Back in the days when they were in the barracks, the men had expressed their friendship with their lives. Most likely, they had shared their treasured treasure maps with their brothers. If they didn't have a good relationship, they wouldn't lend it to them even if they begged. It was even more so between husband and wife. When two people looked at the spring map together, it was like they were glued to each other. Xiaoju's face darkened. He asked slowly, who told you that looking at the spring map together means that we have a good relationship? What kind of person was this? He Sui taught his daughter how to say such things. She didn't even know what to say and what not to say. Did she know that if he didn't appear today and stop her from saying what she was going to say next, what she said would be enough to shock everyone in Jiang City? He Yan suddenly stopped talking, that's what I think. Also, after you looked at the spring map, you said that we had a good relationship. There wasn't any estrangement because of it, right? When did I look at it? Xiaoju's face turned pale. You looked at it at that time, He Yan insisted, it's still a look. We've already looked at it together. He was slightly annoyed, I didn't look at it. You did. I didn't. Forget it, He Yan said, if you say you didn't, then don't. Xiaoju felt a headache coming on. She was the one who was talking nonsense. Why did it seem like she was the one who was being unreasonable? You're talking nonsense. It's fine if you don't take our reputation seriously, but you'll also ruin Xiao Huanqing and Wen Yuyan's reputations. He sneered slightly. He Yan thought for a moment and said, I understand. I won't tell anyone that we looked at the spring map together. I didn't look at it with you, Xiaoju emphasized again. Then can I look at it myself? He Yan was puzzled. Why was Xiaoju still brooding over this matter? You're not allowed to look at it yourself. He raised his eyebrows and warned coldly, do you know what you said just now? You're a fierce woman. He Yan coughed and choked on his own words. She pleaded softly, Commander-in-Chief, don't call me a fierce woman. It sounds like you're scolding me. Oh. Xiaoju said with a faint smile, but I saw that you were quite happy when you said that I would marry no one else but you. If I couldn't marry you, I would jump into the river. Lady, he isn't tall, but I didn't expect you to have so many tricks up your sleeve. Isn't that to prove that your heart is as firm as a rock? He Yan said helplessly, I just wanted them to give up. Otherwise, they would come to find trouble with me every few days. Who could stand that? You can use your beauty to commit crimes. The unlucky one is me. Commander-in-Chief, you have to have some sympathy. I don't have any sympathy. Xiaoju was so angry that she laughed. If it weren't for the fact that he wanted to help her out and teach Ling Xiao and the others not to do useless things, he wouldn't have had to do so in front of others. Even now, he still felt uncomfortable. Why should I have sympathy? He said indifferently, don't you have the ability to control your husband? You only need to hook your finger to make your husband dote on you. It sounds like your husband is more pitiful. He Yan didn't know what to say. You have a face that makes people want to marry only you. Xiaoju's lips curled into a playful smile. She stared into her eyes and said slowly, he loves you like a jewel and a treasure, but you don't love him as much as he loves you. You pester him, but he doesn't change his infatuation and insists on being with you for 3 lifetimes. Fierce woman, aren't you a little too heartless? He Yen had goosebumps when he heard her call him a fierce woman. She quickly moved the stool closer to Xiao Ju and grabbed his arm. She said righteously, that's right. Our commander-in-chief is such a beautiful person. How can she be the one who pesters him? Other than you, no one else has the right to be called a fierce woman. If you want to be with someone for 3 lifetimes, don't even mention crossing a bridge, you can even cross a mountain of swords. No one can be heartless to you, no one. That's not what you said just now. He said slowly. What I said just now was a lie. I'm speaking the truth now. He Yen said, you have to believe me. The girl's eyes were clear and firm, just like the wild cat he met in the courtyard. When its tail was stepped on, its fur would explode, but when it jumped up to be patted, it would be exceptionally obedient. A hint of a smile flashed across his eyes, but it disappeared in a flash. He said lightly, in the future, don't read such nonsense. He paused and said, let's forget about this matter. He Yen was greatly relieved. This person was really not easy to fool. All he did was make him sound a little less cold, and he got so angry. It seemed that second young Master Xiao really cared about his image in other people's eyes. He Yen thought about it and said, Commander-in-Chief, don't just look at these things. Before this, I also said a lot of good things about you. For example, I said that you are proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, and that you are omnipotent. Next time, you must perform well in front of them to prove that what I said is true. Xiao Ju sneered, am I a street performer? That's not true. He Yen scratched his head. He thought for a while and said to Xiao Ju, but next time, if something like this happens again, and there are still people who don't know how to read the situation and come looking for trouble, Commander-in-Chief, you must cooperate with me and show that we are a loving couple. Maybe this way, they will know how difficult it is and retreat, and stop looking for trouble. Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows, cooperate. He Yen nodded. He glanced at He Yen, if you beg me, I can consider it. He Yen said, please, Commander-in-Chief. Xiao Ju, she actually said it out loud so easily. He frowned slightly, and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. You are so spineless, and you call yourself a fierce woman. I told you not to call me a fierce woman. He Yen was angry, Commander-in-Chief, you are really childish. Oh. He raised his eyebrows and said word by word, fierce woman. Childish. However, after the incident in the garden, it was unknown whether He Yan's words had an effect, or whether Xiao Ju's indifferent performance of doting on his beloved wife had an impact. For 2 days in a row, the entire Chui residence was very quiet. There were no more young ladies from Jiang City who wanted to drink tea and chat with Madame Qiao. Hong Qiao took out the teardrop gauze from the box and said, today, Madame will enter the prince's residence, wear this. He Yan nodded, okay. Princess Meng Ji held a banquet in the prince's residence today, and He Yan and Xiao Ju attended. She said that there would be guests, but they didn't know who they were. Cui Yuezhi was still a little confused. Why did Her Highness invite the 2 of you, but not me? He Yan knew that in Mu Hongjin's heart, her and Xiao Ju's identities had already been exposed. If Cui Yuezhi was also present, it would be inconvenient for them to talk. But there was an important guest, and she and Xiao Ju were invited to accompany them. Why? Did they know the other party? But they couldn't figure it out. They would know when they arrived at the prince's residence. After Hong Qiao dressed He Yan went out. Xiao Ju was already waiting outside, talking to Lu Buwang. These days, Lu Buwang wasn't around during the day and only came back at night. When he came back, it was too late. He Yan had already fallen asleep, so he didn't have time to talk to Lu Buwang. Now that she saw Lu Buwang, she had to go out again. Master, she said. In fact, there were several times when He Yan wanted to ask Lu Buwang if he wanted to see Mu Hongjin. But after all, it was someone else's business, and he couldn't interfere too much. Besides, only he knew what had happened between the two of them. Lu Buwang smiled and nodded at her. Be careful. He Yen nodded. Now that there might be Yudo in Jiang City, there might be people who had seen Xiaoju. It was never a bad thing to be careful. Fei Nu and Qi Wu followed them as coachmen. Lin Shuanghe stayed in the Chui residence, so he didn't have to go with them. He Yen and Xiaoju got on the carriage. He Yen asked, "Commander, today, Princess Mengji specially asked you and me to go to the prince's residence for the banquet, but she didn't ask Chui Zhongqi. That means she was worried about our identities. But there are important guests coming. Could it be that the important guests know our identities? Who are they?" Xiaoju lowered her eyes. The emotions in her eyes were unclear, and her voice was extremely flat. People from Shuojing. Chapter 146. He Yen and Xiaoju got off the carriage when they arrived at Prince Mengji's mansion. A servant led the way. This was not their first time visiting the Prince Mengji's mansion, so they felt much more at ease. The servant led He Yen and Xiaoju to the entrance of the banquet hall and said respectfully, "His Highness and the guests are inside. Young Master Qiao and Madam can go in directly." He Yen and Xiaoju entered the banquet hall. Mu Hongjin was leaning on a soft couch, her red robe spread across her face. She had a faint smile on her lips and was listening to the zither player playing the zither. There was another person sitting at a short and long table with his back facing He Yen. He was wearing a bamboo-colored robe and had a jade hairpin on his head. His back view looked somewhat familiar. She was still trying to figure out who this person was when Mu Hongjin's gaze swept past them and she smiled. "Military Governor Xiao is here." He Yen and Xiaoju bowed to Mu Hongjin. At the same time, the man who was sitting with his back facing them also stood up and turned his head to look at them. The space between his brows was as gentle and elegant as an orchid, as clear as a banished immortal. He Yen never thought that he would actually see Chu Zhao in Meng Ji Wang Fu in Jiyang. The shock only lasted for a moment. He Yen immediately knew that things weren't good. She was now disguised as a woman. She didn't know what Chu Zhao would think if he saw her. This person's identity was still unknown. If he went back and told Su Jingfu would use this matter to create trouble for Xiaoju. That wouldn't be good. She stopped in her tracks and subconsciously took a step back towards Xiaoju, trying to block Chu Zhao's gaze. However, she knew that unless she turned around and left immediately, her identity would be discovered by Chu Zhao sooner or later. Xiaoju seemed to sense something. She turned her head slightly and glanced at her. She sneered, "What are you afraid of?" He Yen was about to speak when Chu Zhao saluted the Xiaoju and said with a smile, "Military Governor Xiao, Miss He." Well, He Yen must have seen it. He didn't even need to cover his face. He didn't even need to look in the mirror. He knew that his face must be very ugly at this moment. Xiaoju said, "Fourth young Master Chu. It seems like you two are old acquaintances." Mu Hongjin smiled. "Sit, fourth young Master Chu is a distinguished guest from the Shuo capital." Xiaoju and He Yen sat down at the short table next to them. The maidservant beside her came over to pour tea. Mu Hongjin waved her hand, signaling the musician who was still playing the guqin to leave. The banquet hall quieted down. He Yen lowered his head and looked at the tea leaves floating up and down in his teacup. Illness comes from the mouth and disaster comes from the mouth. Dieting brings no disease, but choosing words leads to no disaster. At this time, it was best to speak less. Xiaoju looked at Chu Zhao and said, "Fourth young Master Chu, what brings you to Jiang?" She went straight to the point and didn't say anything else. Chu Zhao lowered his head and smiled before answering, "I came to Jiang this time because of the Yudo." Yudo? He Yen pricked up his ears to listen. He heard Chu Zhao say, "There are Yudo in Jiang now. I'm afraid that there will be chaos in the near future. I came this time to help your highness and prevent more people in Jiang from suffering from this disaster." He looked at Princess Mengji. Xiaoju smiled slightly. Fourth young Master Chu, how did you find out that there are Yudo in Jiang? We caught a Yudo in the Shuo capital who was plotting to start a war. We followed the clues and found out that the person who met him is now in Jiang. Father and I found out from the other party's secret message that the Yudo is planning to start a war in Jiang. Once the canal is cut off, it will cause trouble for the entire Dewei. Father ordered me to immediately rush to Jiang and inform your highness of this matter to prepare for a rainy day. Xiaoju raised her eyebrows and said in a mocking tone, as far as I know, Shi Jinbo no longer cares about the matters in the residence. I'm afraid that he can't order fourth young Master Chu around. Lin Shuanghe had also said this to He Yan. Shi Jinbo had been fooling around every day and didn't care about the matters in the residence. Shi Jinbo's wife was in charge of the matters in the residence. As for the rest, ever since Chu Zhao had Su Jingfu's support, Shi Jinbo had already become Chu Zhao's residence. It's just a rumor spread by outsiders, Chu Zhao replied in a good-natured manner. I don't dare to disobey father's words. Mu Hongjin seemed to have discovered something from the exchange between the two of them. She wasn't in a hurry to speak. Instead, she drank her tea lazily and quietly observed. If you want to inform Her Highness, a secret letter will do. Xiaoju sneered, fourth young Master Chu, why do you have to personally make a trip? Because there's something more important that needs to be personally handed to Her Highness. Mu Hongjin chuckled, fourth young Master Chu, you brought the Yudo's military defense map. Xiaoju and He Yan looked up at Mu Hongjin at the same time. With the other party's military defense map, the war was already half won. But how did Chu Zhao get such an important thing? He Yan couldn't help but ask, fourth young Master Chu, where did you get this map? How can you be sure that the drawing on this map is real or fake? How I got it depends on luck. Chu Zhao smiled gently, as for whether it's real or fake, I can't be sure. So, I can only give it to Her Highness. He paused and looked at Xiaoju, but I'm relieved to see Military Governor Xiao. With Military Governor Xiao around, regardless of whether the military defense map is real or fake, Jiang City will definitely be saved. After all, Dewei is a genius general, and only Military Governor Xiao has a meritorious service. He Yan's heart skipped a beat when he heard this, and he couldn't help but look at Xiaoju. The water attack in the Battle of Guo City's Long Valley was a hurdle that Xiaoju couldn't overcome. Chu Xilan's words were like stabbing a knife into his wound. Xiaoju's expression was calm. She curled her lips and looked back at Chu Zhao, fourth young Master Chu, aren't you making a mountain out of a molehill by coming all the way to Jiang with a military defense map that we don't know if it's real or fake? Or... She paused, and there was a meaningful look in her eyes. Do you have other important matters to attend to? How can you say that I'm making a mountain out of a molehill? Chu Zhao shook his head, if I stay in Jiang, I can advance and retreat together with all of you. If Yudo really has ulterior motives, Military Governor Xiao and I will fight against the enemy. If the news is fake, it will be a false alarm, and everyone will be happy. Fight against the enemy together. Xiaoju said lazily, fourth young Master Chu, if you can't even save yourself, no one will be in time to save you. Chu Zhao smiled but didn't say anything. Second young Master Zhao's skill at mocking others was unparalleled. Moreover, Chu Xilan was indeed weak. If something really happened, he would be a burden. Military Governor Xiao. Mu Hongjin was almost done watching the show. She had a rough idea of the relationship between these two people. She looked at Xiaoju, I will give you a copy of the military defense map that fourth young Master Chu brought. The total number of soldiers inside and outside Jiang is about 20,000, and they will be under your command. According to the secret letter that fourth young Master Chu brought back, Yudo will definitely rebel within 10 days. Within these 10 days, we... She paused for a moment, must ensure that the people of Jiang are safe. Xiaoju raised her eyebrows, Your Highness, you have considered everything. Mu Hongjin glanced at the smiling Chu Zhao, fourth young Master Chu came from afar, and both of you are old friends. Fourth young Master Chu will also be staying in the Chui residence for the next few days. If you have any important matters to discuss, it will be convenient for you to discuss them. Chu Zhao returned the greeting. Your Highness is very considerate. He Yan, Mu Hongjin was really good. The moment she arrived, she arranged for these two sworn enemies to be together. Not to mention that they had important matters to discuss. He Yan pondered. Just based on the fact that these two people could talk like swords, it would not be easy for them to pass these 10 days peacefully. After exchanging some pleasantries, Mu Hongjin got up and asked someone to send He Yan and the others back to the Chui residence. When there was no one else in the banquet hall, the older maid beside her asked, Your Highness, why did you let fourth young Master Chu stay in the Lieutenant Commander's residence? Military Governor Shao doesn't seem to like fourth young Master Chu. These two people don't get along, Mu Hongjin said faintly. If they don't get along, they can keep each other in check. Shao Huijin is a godly commander, but Jiang City can't be controlled by him alone. After all, no one knows if what he said is true or false. When these two people speak, half of it is true and half of it is false. If you compare them, you can always find some clues. Moreover, she sighed, stood up, and looked at the sky outside the hall. There's not much time left. If the Yudo really wanted to move against Jiang, from tomorrow onwards, she would have to arrange for the people of Jiang to evacuate from the city. Her lord father had handed Jiang City over to her. For so many years, she had been protecting Jiang very well. Now that things had come to this, she could not fail. There was also Mu Xiaolu. She turned around, the corners of her eyes red and deep. She said coldly, Go and call Xiaolu here. He Yan and Xiao Ju left the prince's residence together. Chu Xiao stood beside them. When the three of them left the residence, they did not say anything. He Yan was secretly thinking about how to make this lie flawlessly. He might as well insist that he was originally a man. This time, he disguised himself as a woman and went to Xiaoju to Jiang because he had no other choice. As for why he acted so well, he would say that he was a man and a woman. Qi Wu had been following them for so long. Didn't he not discover anything? When he thought of this, his heart relaxed slightly. Miss He. As he was thinking, someone beside him called his name. He Yan turned around. Chu Zhao stopped and looked at him with a smile. Xiao Ju also stood still and did not go far. He Yan felt a little comforted with his superior by his side. He looked at Chu Zhao and smiled, Fourth young master, you don't have to call me that. Actually, I didn't expect to see Miss He dressed as a woman again after seeing Miss He in red. The young man smiled very gently. Even his praise was sincere. It sounded more sincere than the workers of the embroidery workshop and Lin Shuanghe who blindly boasted with their eyes closed, This dress suits you very well. It suits Miss He very well. He Yan's prepared speech came to an abrupt end. What did he mean by, saw her last time? Ever since she entered the military camp, this was the first time she dressed as a woman. Where did Chu Zhao see her dressed as a woman? He Yan subconsciously looked at Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows slightly as if she was waiting for him to speak. Wait a minute, could it be that Xiao Ju thought that she and Chu Zhao were already in cahoots? You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. He Yan said, Brother Chu, I don't quite understand what you mean. When did I appear in red in front of you? Chu Zhao smiled faintly, at the racecourse in Shuajing. Miss He personally went to the racecourse to protect her father and younger brother. She was valiant and formidable. It was unforgettable. At that time, the wind blew your white veil. He lowered his head and smiled, I accidentally saw your face. At that time, I already knew that you were a woman. The racecourse in Shuajing. What kind of old story is this? How can Chu Zhao still remember it? Does this mean that Chu Zhao already knew that I'm a woman? He Yan was shocked, so, Brother Chu already recognized me when we were in Liangzhou? At that time, I saw that Miss He didn't seem to want her identity to be exposed. Moreover, There were many people in the Imperial Guard station, so I didn't reveal it. Chu Xiao said, however, since we've met here today, there's no need to hide it anymore. Chu Xiao looked at He Yan and said gently, I'm not saying this for anything else. I just hope that Miss He won't worry. I didn't reveal your identity when we were in Liangzhou. Now that we're in Jiang, I won't tell anyone either. After the incident in Jiang, Chu Xiao will pretend that he never met Miss He. Miss He can still return to Liangzhou to make contributions. You don't have to worry about me spreading rumors. He probably noticed He Yan's misgivings when they were in the banquet hall earlier, so he purposely said these words to reassure He Yan. No matter what Chu Xiao's identity was, or what relationship he had with Su Jingfu, just from the way he spoke, he was really very considerate and thoughtful. It was very difficult for people to have a bad impression of him. He Yan smiled and said, then I will thank Brother Chu first. There's no need to thank me between us, Chu Xiao said with a smile, I don't want Miss He to be worried because of my appearance. As for the matter of snitching, Chu Xiao isn't that kind of person. Xiao Ju had been standing beside He Yan and listening to him coldly. When she heard what he said, a mocking smile appeared on her lips. Fourth young Master Chu, you make it sound nice. Didn't you come all the way to Jiang just to snitch? When it comes to snitching, you have to distinguish between friend and foe. Fourth young Master Chu, you don't have to worry about the people in the Southern Mansion Army. He raised his eyebrows and said calmly, even if her identity is exposed one day, I can still protect her. Chu Xiao was stunned and looked at He Yan. Miss He joined the Southern Mansion Army? He Yan replied. Yes. Xiao Ju had already promised him that if they pretended to be husband and wife to solve the Jiang incident, he would let her join the Southern Mansion Army. Although the current situation was not completely solved, it was up to his master to decide whether she would join the Southern Mansion Army or not. Since he said she would join, she would join. Chu Xiao's eyes moved slightly. After a while, he smiled. Then I'll congratulate Miss He. No, Brother He. He Yan nodded. Xiao Ju looked at him calmly. If there's nothing else, fourth young Master Chu, please find a carriage for yourself. The space between husband and wife is not suitable for outsiders. Fourth young Master Chu, please go ahead. He did not hide his disgust for Chu Xiao. Chu Xiao was not angry. He only smiled and said, Military Governor Xiao, let's meet at the Chui residence. He then smiled at He Yan. He Yan awkwardly smiled back. Qi Wu drove the carriage over. He Yan and Xiao Ju got on the carriage. As soon as they sat down, they heard Xiao Ju's cold voice. Were you the one who competed with Xiao at the Shuajing horse farm? He Yan complained incessantly in his heart. It's here, it's here. When Chu Xiao told him about the horse farm, he almost forgot that Xiao Ju was also there at that time. Moreover, Xiao Ju also gave He Yunxing a horse. He Yunxing named it Xiang Xiang. Yes. He Yan did not wait for him to speak and said first, my brother loved the horse that governor gave him. He cut grass and fed it every day. He never had the chance to thank governor. At that time, if governor did not come to our rescue, I don't know how Zhao would have made things difficult for our family. He Yan is unable to repay governor's kindness. Xiao Ju's eyes were cold. So you recognized me early on, right? He Yan was speechless. It was not just early on, they knew each other in their previous lives. But how could he say it? You are the governor of the right military, General Feng Yun. Who in a way can be more handsome than you? I do know you. But at that time, you were high above the clouds and I was just a small ant beside your boots. Even if I knew you, you did not know me. Later, when you entered the military camp, I guess governor had already forgotten about this matter. After all, governor is a person of high status. How could he remember a small ant? He Yan leaned closer to him. How would I know that governor still remembers this matter? She clearly knew that this fellow was full of lies and flattery, but when she saw her bright eyes and white teeth sitting beside her and putting in her best performance, even if she was a little displeased, she also found it funny. Chu Zhao actually knew that this person was a woman before him. It sounded like he was kept in the dark and was at a disadvantage. Xiao Ju looked away and said lightly, "Have you met him again?" "No, no." He Yan quickly replied, "I only met him twice when I was in Shuo capital." Then, he complained, "How would I know that it was such a coincidence? He was also at the racecourse at that time and saw my face. If I knew, I would have covered my face tightly and wore an iron mask. Look at how sharp his eyes are, he does not know who I am." "You don't want him to see your face?" "Of course not." He Yan was confused. "If I leave a loophole for others to exploit, who knows if something will happen?" Xiao Ju laughed softly. "You are not too stupid." "Governor," He Yan asked, "do you think that fourth young master Chu will tell others about my identity?" Although Chu Zhao said so, He Yan did not dare to believe him easily. Especially since this person's identity was mysterious. It was unknown whether he was an enemy or a friend. "Now you know to be afraid." "Not really," He Yan said, "if he wants to tell, I will pack up and run away in advance." He Yan said inside. "It is just that I have been in the Liang province guard for so long. I really can't bear to part with Governor. If I really have to part with Governor, it will be very difficult. What you can't bear to part with is the opportunity to enter the Southern Prefecture Army." Xiao Ju was unmoved. "How can you think of me like this?" He Yan said seriously. "With my skills, I will be highly valued by any general. The reason why I can't forget about the Southern Prefecture Army is because it is the governor's army." It was probably due to Xiao Ju's constant flattery that unknowingly, He Yan was able to speak flatteringly without blushing or panting. "Governor, what you said just now still counts, right?" "What did I say?" "That even if my identity is exposed and everyone knows that I am a woman, you can still protect me?" Xiao Ju sneered. "Don't worry. No matter how long the Chu clan's reach is, it is not as deep as the Southern Prefecture Army." However, his beautiful eyes focused on He Yan and he said calmly, "Lady, he is so troublesome. Why should I waste my time and effort and take so many risks for you?" "Because we have seen the map together. It is not a normal relationship." He Yan answered calmly. Xiao Ju's calm face suddenly cracked. "What did you say?" "Don't worry." He Yan put his index finger in front of his mouth and made a shushing gesture. He said, "I will never tell anyone that the governor and I saw the map together on the first day you came to Jiang." The carriage stopped in front of the Chui residence. He Yan and Xiao Ju had just entered. Before they reached the courtyard, they saw Lin Shuanghe hurriedly walking towards them. When Lin Shuanghe saw the two of them, he closed his fan. "You are finally back. Did you know? Fourth young master Chu came to Jiang." He Yan did not wait for him to finish. "You already know?" Lin Shuanghe was stunned. "He arrived just a moment before you. I heard that Princess Meng Ji arranged for him to stay in the Chui residence." "What is going on?" He looked around and saw that there was no one around. He leaned closer and whispered, "Is there a conspiracy?" "And younger sister he." Lin Shuanghe felt a headache coming on. "You can't let Chu Xilan see you like this. What if your identity is exposed? We have already met in the prince's residence." He Yan comforted him. "Fourth young master Chu also promised us that he will not tell anyone about this for the time being. Brother Lin, you can rest assured. You have already met." Lin Shuanghe looked at Xiao Ju and He Yan. He understood a little and asked, "Princess Meng Ji asked you to come to the prince's residence to meet Chu Xilan, right?" He Yan nodded. "What is Chu Xilan doing in Jiang?" Lin Shuanghe asked curiously. "He's a young master from the Shuo capital. Wouldn't he come so far to sightsee? Why didn't he come earlier or later? You just arrived in Jiang, and he arrived right after you." What a coincidence. He didn't know about the Yuto yet. He Yen said, it's a long story. Where's my master? Mr. Lu just came back. Lin Shuanghe asked, what's wrong? He Yen looked at Xiaoju. When I saved the Little Highness, my master also mentioned that he came to Jiang City to track down a group of Yuto. Since the news brought by fourth young master Chu is related to Yuto, why don't you call my master over as well? Once we compare the information, we may find something else. After a pause, she was afraid that Xiaoju didn't trust Lu Buwang, so she said, my master is definitely not a bad person. Commander-in-Chief, you can rest assured. Xiaoju nodded slightly. Call Mr. Lu and let's talk in the room. In the courtyard, the manservant moved the things unloaded from the carriage into the room one by one. From clothes to food, even a mattress and incense, everything was there. These things were all prepared for Chu Zhao before he came to Jiang by eldest Miss Su. If it were anyone else, they would have been touched and gratified by such considerate preparations. Chu Zhao sat in the room and looked at the small table that was gradually filling up, but his expression didn't change. Ying Xiang walked over. Due to the terrain and rivers, the women of Jiang were born with deep eyebrows and were more beautiful. Even so, Ying Xiang was still the most eye-catching one among them. She walked to Chu Zhao with a tea tray, put down the teapot, and poured a cup of tea for Chu Zhao. She said softly, young master, the room has been tidied up. Chu Zhao nodded and looked outside the courtyard. The room that Cui Yuezhi arranged was not far away from Xiaoju's room. Military Governor Xiao has just returned, Ying Xiang said. He entered the room with the swordsman in white and young Master Lin. Take it that they are talking together. As for what they were talking about, there was no doubt that it was related to him. However, he wouldn't take this matter to heart. Chu Zhao took a sip of tea and asked, do you know the whereabouts of Chai Anshi? Chapter 147. Do you know Chai Anshi's whereabouts? Ying Xiang shook her head. I heard that Princess Mengji is now sending people to search for Chai Anshi's whereabouts. Chu Zhao smiled carelessly. Xiao Huijin came to Jiang to find someone. After a pause, he asked the woman beside him, who is Lu Buwang? I've never heard of this person's name before. On the surface, he's Military Governor Zhao's master. Where did Xiao Huijin's master come from? Ying Xiang also nodded, but they seem to trust and value Mr. Lu very much. Chu Zhao put down the teacup in his hand. These are not important. The most important thing is to find Chai Anshi before Xiao Huijin. I understand, Ying Xiang said hesitantly after a moment, but how do you plan to treat Miss He? Although he had already heard from Chu Zhao that He Yan was a girl and his heart was already prepared, it was not until he saw He Yan's female body through the window that he felt it was real. It was really difficult to connect the petite and weak girl in front of her with the valiant and cold young man in her memory. Don't you think it's strange that Xiao Huijin has a woman with him? Chu Zhao smiled slightly. I really want to know how much he trusts this woman. Ying Xiang lowered her eyes and didn't speak. Niao Niao steam rose from the tea in the teacup and quickly escaped into the air, leaving no trace behind. On the other side, the people in the room were sitting separately. This is the Yudo's military defense map. He Yan handed the scroll to Lu Buwang. The fourth young master of Count Shi Jin's mansion brought news that the Yudo will attack Jiang in a few days, but I don't know if it's true or not. Master, take a look at this military defense map. Is there any problem? Lu Buwang looked at it for a moment and put down the scroll in his hand. I don't know if this map is real or fake, but if Yudo really wants to attack Jiang, it will indeed start from the canal as depicted on the map. After all, the most important thing in Jiang City was this canal. Cutting off the canal meant cutting off the lifeline of the city. Mr. Lu, you once said that you were tracking Yudo to Jiang. Xiao Ju looked at Lu Buwang. Can you tell me the reason? Lu Buwang thought for a moment before saying, every year before and after the Water God Festival, I will go back to Jiang to take a look. This year, before they reached Jiang, they encountered a massacre outside Jiang City. Someone took advantage of the night to kill all the people in the village outside the city. He changed into the clothes of the people in the village and entered the city with a fake identity. One of the children who was lucky enough to escape told me about this. I originally thought that it was an enemy seeking revenge or killing people to rob money. However, when I was investigating, I found that these people weren't from Dawei. These Yuto disguised themselves as commoners and sneaked into the city. It's not something that can be done overnight. I can only find a few. I'm afraid that before this, many commoners outside the city have already been killed. There are also many disguised Yuto in Jiang City. Master, are you saying that many Yuto have already entered? He Yen asked. Lu Buwang said, yes, they have been planning for a long time. They were waiting for the Water God Festival to cause trouble and kidnap His Highness. However, their plan was disrupted by you, so they should soon take action again. Master Lu, do you mean that there will be a war in Jiang City soon? Lin Shuanghe said nervously, isn't it very unsafe here? Don't worry. He Yen comforted him. Princess Mengji once mentioned to us that she would evacuate the commoners from the city to a slightly safer place in the next few days. Brother Lin will be fine with the commoners in Jiang City at that time. Only then did Lin Shuanghe feel a little relieved, but he immediately put on a righteous appearance. He said, what do you mean by following the commoners in the city? How can I be such a coward? Naturally, I will advance and retreat together with my brothers and live and die together. Don't try to persuade me. I must be with you and won't live alone. He Yen was speechless for a moment before he said to Lu Buwang, Master, Princess Mengji has handed the city gate guards to the commander-in-chief. Do you want to come and take a look? Have you forgotten? Lu Buwang was a little helpless. I only know how to set up formations and don't know how to fight. That was true. Lu Buwang knew Chimenduanjia, bow, horse, saber, and spear, but they were all his skills. Back then, when he taught her Chimenduanjia, He Yen studied it himself and used it to set up formations. Only then did he gradually develop his own set of skills. You don't know how to fight? Lin Shuanghe was very surprised. My younger sister he is so good at memorizing military books. I thought that a famous teacher produced a brilliant disciple. Why? Is my younger sister he a self-taught genius? He Yen smiled awkwardly. She's very talented. Maybe I was a female general in my previous life, so I can understand it easily. Xiao Ju sneered and didn't say anything. In the next few days, I will continue to track down the whereabouts of that group of Yuto. Lu Buwang said, if we find their heads, we may be able to solve a lot of problems. As for the city gate army of Jiang, I'll leave it to military governor Xiao. Lu Buwang looked at Xiao Ju. He now knew Xiao Ju's identity. The city gate army doesn't have the advantage in terms of numbers. Military Governor Xiao, please take care of the people of Jiang. He seemed to have deep feelings for Jiang. Xiao Ju nodded. Everyone talked about the Yudo matter again. Xiao Ju would go to train the city gate army of Jiang City tomorrow. The time was very short, so it wasn't an easy task for him. Lu Buwang continued to track down the whereabouts of the Yuto. Lin Shuanghe didn't expect him to do anything, so he just needed to stay in the Chui mansion and wait for orders. As for He Yen, she became the most embarrassed one. She wanted to follow Xiao Ju to take a look at the city gate army, but Mu Hongjin didn't let her go. She didn't know if something would happen. She simply made another copy of the military defense map and planned to see if she could set up a new formation according to the terrain of Jiang overnight. If this military defense map was real, it would be twice the result with half the effort. If it was fake, she could find a loophole in it and wouldn't be fooled. After speaking, everyone was about to leave. As soon as they pushed the door open, they saw a beautiful maid standing under the tree in the courtyard outside the door. It was Chu Zhao's personal maid, Ying Xiang. She didn't know how long she had been standing here. When she saw everyone come out, she stepped forward and bowed to He Yen. Miss He. He Yen returned the greeting. Young master has something to say to Miss He, Ing Xiang said with a smile. He's waiting in the front hall. Does Miss He have time? He Yan looked back and saw Lin Shuanghe waving at her slightly, indicating that she shouldn't go. Xiao Ju looked calm, and no one could tell what she was thinking. Seeing this, Ing Xiang said with a smile, young master said that he might have some misunderstandings with Miss He before, so he wants to clarify things with Miss He in person. Last time, when we were in the Yangzhou Guards, he didn't have time to say goodbye to you and left without saying goodbye. It was very rude of him. He hopes that you won't take it to heart. Today, he'll take it as an apology. He Yan didn't take the small matter of leaving without saying goodbye to heart. There were so many things to do in the Yangzhou Guards, so he didn't have the time to pursue these trivial matters. He was the young master of Count Shi Jin's residence, yet he remembered it so clearly and spoke so politely. If she continued to be pretentious, it would seem that she didn't know what was good for her. Moreover, He Yan really wanted to know what identity Chu Zhao had now and what position he had come to the Yangzhou Guards. He also wanted to know whether the so-called dealing with Yuto was just an excuse or if he had other motives. Thinking of this, he cheerfully replied, okay. Lin Shuanghe's expression changed greatly. Younger sister He. Thank you for your tolerance, young master. Ing Xiang was overjoyed. Commander-in-Chief, I'll go take a look first, He Yan said to Xiao Ju. You don't have to wait for me for dinner tonight. After saying this, he said goodbye to Lu Buwang. Master, I'll leave first. Lin Shuanghe still wanted to say a few more words of advice, but He Yan had already left with Ing Xiang. Lu Buwang still had matters to attend to, so he only bowed slightly to Xiao Ju and Ing Xiang before leaving. After they left, Lin Shuanghe asked Xiao Ju, you're letting her go just like that? Otherwise? That's Chu Xilan. Didn't younger sister He like him so much that she lost her soul? She was stood up by him and even went to look at the moon alone. Such an irresponsible heartless person actually came back to find my younger sister He. Just wait and see, he'll definitely play the same trick again and use gentle attacks to move my younger sister He's heart. Isn't that good? Xiao Ju turned around and lazily mocked, the liar finally got what he wanted. Aren't you worried? Lin Shuanghe waved his fan and followed him closely. If Chu Xilan sees my younger sister He's stunning red makeup, he'll be beastly and do something bad to my younger sister He. What should I do? Xiao Ju entered the room, poured herself a cup of tea, and said casually, do you have some misunderstanding about Chu Xilan's taste? How can that liar's red makeup be worthy of the word stunning? How is it not stunning? Lin Shuanghe was angry. Xiao Huijin, you can't compare your own face with the rest of the world. Xiao Ju didn't bother to pay attention to him and only said, besides, did Chu Xilan do something bad to her? A trace of mockery flashed through his eyes. That guy can twist off Chu Xilan's head with his bare hands. Instead of worrying about her innocence, it's better to worry about Chu Xilan. Lin Shuanghe, He Yan bumped into Chu Xilan in the front hall. When Chu Xilan saw her, he smiled and stood up. Miss He. Fourth young master Chu. He Yan returned the greeting. The sky had already darkened. The night in Jiang City was lively and bustling. Chu Zhao looked outside and said, shall we go out for a walk? He Yan didn't know what He Yan had in mind, but there were too many people in the Chui residence, so it wasn't convenient for them to talk like this. He Yan said, okay. The two of them walked out of the residence. Spring nights in Jiang were warm and harmonious. Along the banks of the river, hawkers carried lanterns and hawked their wares along the street. The pavilions were scattered randomly, and the scenery was beautiful. It could be said that between the alleys of the village, there were stringed instruments and singing, and there was a society where day and night were connected. However, such a gentle and bustling night was full of hidden murderous intentions. People came and went, and under the smiles of the hawkers, there were many Yuto who harbored evil intentions. When she thought about it this way, she felt that no matter how lively and interesting the scene was, it would become dull and boring. He Yan couldn't help but frown. Miss He, are you angry with me? Chu Zhao, who was beside her, asked softly. Why would I be? She was a little surprised. Then why did you frown when you went out with me, as if you had something on your mind? He Yan couldn't help but laugh. No, I was just thinking about the Yuto and was worried. After a moment of silence, Chu Zhao said, Miss He, you don't have to worry. Her Highness will arrange everything. Besides, there's still Military Governor Xiao, isn't there? He wasn't stingy with his praise for Xiao Ju. He Yan wanted to test him, so she asked, I thought that fourth young Master Chu didn't get along with our governor. Military Governor Xiao has some misunderstandings about me. Chu Zhao smiled. However, his position is slightly different from mine. We're just working for different masters. He actually admitted it just like that. He Yan was a little surprised. However, Military Governor Xiao and I are on the same page regarding the Yuto. Miss He, you don't have to worry. Chu Zhao said, I'm a citizen of Dawei. Naturally, I don't want to see Dawei's rivers and mountains be invaded by foreign tribes. He Yan nodded. That's natural. When the nest is overturned, no egg will remain unbroken. We should be united against foreign enemies. Is Miss He relieved after hearing what I said? He asked. He Yan asked, why are you relieved? I won't hurt Military Governor Xiao. Miss He, you don't have to be wary of me because of Military Governor Xiao. He Yan laughed dryly. Fourth young Master Chu, you're overthinking. I'm not wary of you. Is that so? Chu Zhao smiled a little sadly. But ever since we met this time, you stopped calling me Brother Chu. You called me fourth young Master Chu. It sounds like you're deliberately drawing a line between us. That works too. He Yan said, it's nothing. If you don't think it's good, I can call you Brother Chu again. Then can I call you He? He Yan was stunned for a moment. The young man's smile was especially gentle, like a charming and harmless orchid blooming in the night. In the spring night of Jiang, his robes were fragrant, and his face was handsome. The passers-by couldn't help but glance at him. He was really eye-catching. It was hard to say anything harsh to such a good-looking and good-tempered person. He Yan hesitated for a moment and said, if you want to call me that, then just call me that. Chu Zhao's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. He continued to walk along the riverbank with He Yan. He said, I haven't apologized to He for what happened before. That day, I made an appointment to drink with you at Mount Baiyue, but something came up at the last minute and I couldn't make it. The next day, I left early and didn't even have time to say goodbye to He. Later, when I thought of this in Shuajing, I felt very regretful. Brother Chu, you don't have to take such a small matter to heart, He Yan said. Moreover, you didn't do it on purpose. I'm not angry because of it. If it weren't for Chu Zhao, she wouldn't have gone to the foot of Mount Baiyue that night, and she wouldn't have waited for Xiao Ju. She also wouldn't have known that the person who saved her from the darkness on the mountaintop behind Yuhua Temple was Xiao Ju. Perhaps, this was a blessing in disguise. He didn't take it to heart because he is broad-minded. Chu Zhao smiled. But I can't pretend that this didn't happen. I must apologize to He. He looked forward. I'll give He something. He Yan was startled. What is it? Chu Zhao stretched out his hand. In the palm of his hand lay a small tassel. The tassel was decorated with a very delicate pomegranate flower carved from red jade. Below the tassel was a red tassel. Although it was small, it was very ingenious. Today, at the gate of the Wang Fu, I saw He wearing a long whip at his waist. Chu Zhao looked at her gently. I was lucky enough to obtain a flower tassel. But I don't know martial arts, and I don't have a weapon. It's a pity that it's with me. But this flower tassel is very compatible with He's long whip. Why don't He try it and see if it'll be better? He Yan subconsciously wanted to refuse, I can't accept a reward without any effort. Brother Chu, let's just forget about it. Besides, this thing doesn't look cheap. That red jade was small, and its color was translucent like the clouds. Who knew if it would be another, several hundred gold? She always took things here and there and received small gifts there. Those who didn't know would think that she was really here to cheat. He calls me Brother Chu, which means that he treats me as a friend. It's very common for friends to give gifts. Moreover, he worries too much. This flower tassel isn't expensive, and this jade is fake. He doesn't have to feel burdened. It's useless to leave this thing with me. He doesn't want it, but he dislikes me. Or perhaps, deep down in his heart, he still sees me as an enemy. Even if his words were slightly accusing and wronged, when he said it, it was still gentle and calm. He Yen hesitated for a moment. Is this pomegranate flower tassel really a fake jade? Chu Zhao smiled. He wants real jade. I may need to raise some money. Since it was fake jade, it wasn't very expensive. It should be more straightforward to accept it. He Yen smiled. Then, thank you very much, Brother Chu. She reached out and took out the purple jade whip from her waist. She tied the flower tassel to the purple jade whip's wooden handle. The black whip suddenly looked more lively and beautiful. It really matches He's whip. Chu Zhao smiled. Courtesy demands reciprocity. Since Brother Chu gave me a flower tassel, I should also give Brother Chu something in return. In the end, He Yen felt that if she didn't return the favor, she would feel that she was taking advantage of Chu Zhao. She said, if Brother Chu takes a fancy to anything in the night market today, I can give it to Brother Chu. After saying that, she reached her hand into her sleeve and touched her pitiful string of copper coins. She added weakly, however, I left in a hurry, so I didn't bring too much money. Brother Chu, you can choose what you want. After all, she didn't bring Lin Shuanghe with her today. She couldn't just buy whatever she wanted. Chu Zhao couldn't help but smile. He looked at her and said, okay. He Yen followed him. The night market in Jiang was very lively. People were selling things at night. From snacks to rouge and face powder, old books and ancient books to rusty weapons, everything was available. Both of them were good-looking. When they walked past a place, they received warm greetings. When they reached the end of the road in front, they saw a group of people surrounding a vendor. He Yen followed Chu Zhao to take a look and saw that it was a sugar painter. The peddler was a young man. He wore a clean green robe and sat in front of the stall. In front of him was a stone slab that had been wiped clean. Beside him was a large pot that was simmering with sparkling red syrup. He scooped a spoonful of syrup from the pot with a big iron ladle and poured it on the slate. His movements were very fast. The iron ladle moved up and down in his hand like a painting brush. The falling syrup outlined a complicated or exquisite pattern. Soon, it was cast into shape. Then, he used a small spatula to scoop up the picture on the slate and stuck a bamboo stick on it. This is a sugar pancake. He Yen was happy. I didn't expect Jiang to have it too. In the past, when she was in Shuajing, there was a temple fair every year. Due to her subtle identity, she was afraid that she would be exposed. Therefore, she didn't go to such crowded places if she could. Therefore, she never went to the temple fair. She could only wait for her sisters to come back from the temple fair and secretly eavesdrop on them talking about the lively scenes and new things at the temple fair. Sugar pancakes were the same. There was a master who made sugar pancakes in Shuajing. He was very good at it. Every time He Yen heard them talk about it, she looked forward to it. Once, she couldn't help but secretly beg Madame He to bring one for her. Perhaps Madame He saw how pitiful she was and how much she wanted it, so she really brought one for her from the temple fair. He Yen still remembered that it was a picture of a bird. She couldn't bear to eat it, so she put the sugar figurine in the pen holder. However, the weather was hot, so it melted in 2 days. The syrup was sticky and it melted on the table. Madame He scolded her. At that time, she didn't think it was dirty. She just regretfully scooped it up with her hands. She thought that it would be better if the sugar painting could last longer. She did not expect to see something new when she was young, but she did not expect to see it in Jiang. Looking at this young man's craftsmanship, she thought that he was on par with the master in Shuajing. He Yen pulled Chu Zhao and squeezed forward. They saw that there were many sugar paintings on the haystack at the side. They looked like auspicious flowers, birds, phoenixes, birds, and beasts. They were very lifelike. Chu Zhao glanced at He Yen and suddenly smiled. I like this. He wants to give me something. Why don't you give me a sugar painting? You like this? What's so difficult about it? He Yen was very generous. She waved her hand. Young man, what's the most expensive sugar painting you have here? There was a banner next to the sugar painting. The price was 2 copper coins each. She brought a lot of copper coins, so it should be enough. The stall owner smiled and said, the most expensive one is a flower basket. It costs 8 copper coins. Do you want one? What was a flower basket? However, choosing the most expensive one was definitely not wrong. He Yen then asked Chu Zhao, Brother Chu, what do you think? Chu Zhao tried to hold back his laughter. That's good. Young man. He Yen took out 8 copper coins and said, please make a flower basket. Make it beautiful. The stall owner said, no problem. He scooped a spoonful of syrup from the pot and made a thin round cake. Then, he cast a circle of sugar lines on the round cake and slowly drew a vertical line. He Yen watched intently as the flower basket changed from a flat bottom to a rich and lively one. There was a basket frame and a handle. The stall owner was very honest and added a lot of flowers to the handle. He Yen counted. There were Chinese roses, daffodils, chrysanthemums, peach blossoms, lotus blossoms. Flowers from different seasons were all piled into a basket. It was lively and gorgeous. He Yen watched as the basket filled up bit by bit. Suddenly, she had an idea. She asked the stall owner, young man, I'm giving this flower basket to my friend. Can you write my friend's name on the basket? Of course. Chu Zhao paused and his smile faded. That's not necessary, what's wrong? He Yen was puzzled. Your name is so beautiful. It's a pity that it's not written on the basket. Beautiful. Yes. He Yen nodded. Zhao means bright. Xylan means vanilla. The person who gave you this name must love you very much. They hope that you have a noble character and a bright future. That's why they gave you such an elegant name. Chu Zhao was stunned. The girl had already turned around and said to the stall owner, young man, please write Xylan. Chapter 148. On the way back, He Yen kept looking at the basket of flowers in Chu Zhao's hands. The flower basket looked very beautiful. The peddler wrote the 2 words, Xylan, with extra care. His words were elegant and refined, and when placed together with the various fragrances in the basket, they really brought out the best in each other. Brother Chu, you must eat it as soon as you get back, He Yen said. Otherwise, with the weather in Jiang, it will melt very quickly. She had also bought a qilin-shaped one for herself, but she had already finished it. I've tasted it. It tastes good, and it's not too sweet. Chu Zhao smiled gently. Thank you, He. I'll be very careful when I get back. He Yen was finally relieved. After they bought the sugar paintings, they walked back along the river bank. When there was nothing to talk about, He Yen occasionally asked Su Zhiheng about his visit. Brother Chu, how was it when you went back to attend your friend's wedding? Was it very lively? Chu Zhao was slightly startled, but then he smiled and replied, yes, it was very lively. After all, she was General Fei Hong's sister. His Highness the Crown Prince even personally came to congratulate her. He Yen was a little suspicious. His Highness the Crown Prince? Did the crown prince come to see Su Zhiheng get married for Su Zhiheng, He Rufei, or both? Was the crown prince also involved in the conspiracy between the He family and the Su family? Furthermore, did the crown prince know her identity? But Chu Zhao sighed again. Perhaps Master Su was deeply in love with his late wife. During the wedding, he even cried. He Yen said, "Ah." Perhaps her face was full of disbelief, but Chu Zhao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What's wrong? You don't believe that there are men in this world who are deeply in love? He Yen thought to himself. Of course, she believed that there were men in this world who were deeply in love. For example, He Sui, her current father. After Madam He passed away, he raised his 2 children alone. Lady He was so arrogant and willful. He Sui could spoil the little girl because she looked like his wife. It could be seen that there were people in the world who were deeply in love and had no regrets. But this person could be anyone, and it definitely wouldn't be Su Zhiheng. It's not that I don't believe him. He Yen concealed the ridicule in his eyes and said, it's just that if he behaves like this, wouldn't his new wife be angry? General Fei Hong and the other members of the He family were all deeply moved. So, although it's lively, it's just that this wedding banquet is a little sad. He Yen felt that among the many jokes he had heard this year, Chu Zhao's joke was the funniest. Would the He family be sad for her? If this was said to the pigs in the pigsty, the pigs would feel that their brains had been insulted. But when Chu Zhao talked about this matter, it was obvious that most people thought this way. If he did something bad, then he did it. But after he did it, he put on a sorrowful and pitiful appearance and pretended to be a pitiful person who was rarely affectionate and righteous. It was really disgusting. He doesn't seem to agree with this one's words. Chu Zhao paid attention to her expression. He Yen smiled and said, it's nothing. I just feel that this old Master Su is very interesting. What do you mean? If he really is deeply in love and can't forget his wife, even if His Majesty personally bestows the marriage, he can still refuse if he wants to. After all, he's a man. He Yen lightly mocked, if he's a woman, it's normal for her to be unable to decide her own marriage fate. Brother Chu, you've heard of young masters who snatch by force, you've heard of evil tyrants who force women into prostitution, and you've heard of beastly fathers who sell their daughters for glory. But have you ever heard of a woman who does this? From what Brother Chu said just now, that old Master Su is like a weak woman who was forced to get married. That newly married young Mistress Su is like an evil person who forced him to marry her. What does this mean? If he doesn't want to get married, no one can drag him to the wedding hall. If he doesn't want to consummate his marriage, could it be that young Mistress Su can still take him by force? If he still continues to be obsessed with his deceased wife, in the future, what will the new young Mistress Su do? I feel that it's not fair to that person. This friend of Brother Chu's is also a bit hypocritical. She spoke bluntly. He Xining was her younger sister from the same father and mother. Even though she hated the He family, He Xining had never done anything to her. He Yen couldn't love her, nor could he hate her. He could only treat her as a stranger. Any sane person who heard this would only think that Su Zhiheng was the one who was in the wrong. It wasn't enough to destroy one member of the He family. Now, he had to send in another victim. How cold-blooded and ridiculous. Chu Zhao was stunned for a moment. Then, he suddenly smiled and stopped walking. He cupped his hands and said to He Yen, is this one narrow-minded? Or is it that Brother He, as a woman, can stand in a woman's shoes and empathize? It's just that no one has ever thought of standing in their shoes. He is very different from ordinary women. He Yen looked at her and asked, how is he different? Chu Zhao continued to walk forward. His voice was still very gentle as he said, most women, even when faced with this kind of predicament, have long been numb and indifferent. They don't think as much as he does. He is thinking for them right now, but it's very likely that they're enjoying themselves and will blame you for meddling in other people's business. He Yen smiled and said, Brother Chu's words sound a bit high and mighty. Chu Zhao's smile froze for a moment. Why do you say that? The imperial court is a man's imperial court. The major affairs of the world are the major affairs of the world. Even when it comes to reading books and going to the battlefield, it's also men who have a unique style. The world praises men as heroes, but at most, they praise women as beauties. It's really unreasonable. Men have taken advantage of the world, but in turn, they blame women for being numb and not wanting to make progress. If this isn't high and mighty, then what is it? Brother Chu thinks that I'm very different from ordinary women because I've read books, walked out of the house, and even rebelled against the orthodoxy and entered the army. There aren't many women like me in the world. But if you let those women be like me and see the snow of the Yangzhou Guard, the water of Jiang City, the long moon of the desert, and the rivers, seas, and mountains, do you think they'll be willing to be trapped in a house that's filled with jealousy? Do you think they'll still be complacent, numb, and ignorant? He Yen smiled. At this moment, her smile carried a bit of ridicule. It was actually somewhat similar to Xiao Ju's. I think the men in the world are worried about this point, so they've set up many ridiculous rules to bind women. They've used the 3 cardinal principles and 5 constant principles to break their wings. They've also used those groundless virtuous wives and beauties to judge them. The more ignorant they are, the more the men feel at ease. It's clearly their fault, but they still have to say, look, women are shallow. Because they also know that once a woman has the chance to choose, she'll definitely not be willing to become a vase in the backyard waiting for her husband to feed her. Those outstanding women will become generals, swordsmen, scholars, and aides. They'll compete with them for the glory of the world, and they won't necessarily win. The girl's eyes were clear and bright like the spring water in Jiang City. They were transparent and clear, and one could see them clearly. They were clean and translucent, as if they could reflect the most brilliant sunlight. Chu Xiao was momentarily stunned. He had always been eloquent and would never make the atmosphere awkward, but at this moment, he actually didn't know what to say. It was as if no matter what he said, he couldn't refute the person in front of him. It was clearly laughable, overconfident, and naive to the point that it made people feel annoyed. It was awe-inspiring righteousness, but it actually reflected a person's shadow. There was nowhere to hide in the darkness. He Yan also felt that it was unfair. Although pretending to be He Rufei brought a lot of pain to her life, at the same time, it also allowed her to see many things that women couldn't see in their entire lives. If she didn't pretend to be He Rufei, she wouldn't have known that compared to women, men could do so much more. If you were talented in literature, you could become a scholar with a stomach full of scriptures. If you were outstanding in martial arts, you could become a general with outstanding military achievements. Even if you were mediocre in everything, you could still be the most ordinary person on the street. To put it bluntly, even in Lutong village, women were gambling prostitutes, while men were gambling customers. It was because she later became young Mistress Su, and had been both a man and a woman that she knew that the world treated men and women differently. It wasn't that men didn't suffer, but their suffering could become the cornerstone to judge themselves. As for women's suffering, they waited their entire lives for men's affirmation. They were all reincarnated as humans, so who was more noble than the other? The funny thing was that some men even looked down on women from the bottom of their hearts. It made people speechless. After she finished speaking in one breath, she realized that Chu Xiao didn't say anything for a while. She secretly thought, could it be that my words offended Chu Xiao? But on second thought, if she offended him, then so be it. In any case, he didn't have the strength to truss a chicken. Even if he fought, he wouldn't be able to beat her. Brother Chu, what I said just now was a bit too impatient. He Yen said with a smile, I hope Brother Chu won't mind my lack of manners. I won't. Chu Xiao looked at her with a strange look in his eyes, his heart is admirable. Chu Xiao is ashamed of his inferiority. In the future, I won't say such nonsense like today. His words, I will always keep them in my heart. Chu Xiao was really a gentleman. Just now, she had said a lot of things, but he was still very gentle like a spring breeze. He Yen smiled, Then let's go quickly. Chu Zhao nodded and smiled in response. The two of them continued to walk on the road back to Chui Manor. He Yan lowered his head and secretly sighed in his heart. Chu Zhao and Xiao Ju were ultimately different. When dealing with women, they both thought that women were weak and couldn't protect themselves. However, the former's judgment had a trace of negation and condescension, while the latter's treatment of the female corpse in the backyard of the Sun family in Yangzhou City was more of pity. As a general, he should be magnanimous, upright, calm, and brave. But more importantly, he should have a heart of pity for the weak. When He Yan and Chu Zhao came back, it was already very late. Chu Zhao's courtyard was a bit further away than He Yan's courtyard. When they reached the door, Chu Zhao said, he should also rest early today. Brother Chu, remember to eat it early. He Yan was still thinking about his candy basket painting, so he reminded him. He looked at the flower basket in his hand, shook his head, and smiled, definitely. He Yan watched him leave, then turned around and wanted to go back to the room. When she looked back, she saw a person standing in the small pavilion under the long corridor, looking at her with a smile. His white clothes fluttered in the wind. It was Lu Buwang. Master hasn't rested yet? He Yan walked over and asked. She rarely saw Lu Buwang these days at night. I came out to get some fresh air. Lu Buwang looked at her. Did you go to buy candy paintings? He Yan nodded. Fourth young Master Chu helped me hide my identity. After thinking about it, I still gave him something. I was kind to him, so he couldn't go around telling others my secret. Candy paintings in Jiang City are quite cheap. I gave him the most expensive one. It's at least 10 copper coins in Shuajing City, but only 8 copper coins here. It's cheap and good. Lu Buwang smiled and looked at her. You're much more lively now than before. He Yan was stunned. When she met Lu Buwang in her previous life, it was the most difficult time. She had just escaped from the peaceful days in Shuajing City and came to the cruel and bloody military camp. She had many secrets, so she was always a little cautious. Even though she occasionally showed her unbridled side when she was with Lu Buwang on the mountain, most of the time, she tried not to cause trouble for others. Now that she thought about it, it seemed that since she became Lady He, she had unconsciously let go of herself a lot. For example, going out to buy candy paintings with Chu Zhao today was absolutely impossible in the past. Was it because she was a woman now, or was it because she could do whatever she wanted without the restrictions of the He family? And she didn't have to worry about the secret under the mask being seen by others? Isn't it good to be like this now? He Yan said with a smile, it doesn't have to be steady. Lu Buwang said, it's good to be like this. When he said this, he looked a little disappointed. No one knew what he was thinking. He Yan wanted to ask, but when she saw Lu Buwang's indifferent gaze, she swallowed the words back. Lu Buwang seemed a little sad. The moon in spring was not as bright as the one in autumn. It was hazy and cute. Lu Buwang's gaze fell on the corners of his little disciple's mouth, but another figure appeared in his mind. Mu Hongjin. Back then, Mu Hongjin was also like this. Her eyes were clean and bright, and occasionally there was a trace of wisdom in them. Her red dress was also delicate, and there were always some flowers and birds embroidered on the corners of her dress, which was exquisite and beautiful. The young girl always had 2 long braids with silver bells under them. When she walked, the bells would make a pleasant tinkling sound. Sometimes, before he got close, he would hear the sound of the bells and know that she had come. At that time, he had such a tail following him every day, which was really annoying. He had said many times that he hoped the two of them would part ways. Every time, Mu Hongjin would pout and immediately cry. No matter how hard Lu Buwang's heart was, he was not good at dealing with a girl's tears. So every time, she easily resolved it. In the end, he had tacitly agreed that this person was a sticky candy that he couldn't get rid of. He let her follow him and cause trouble for him. Mu Hongjin knew how to enjoy life. She had brought a lot of money, but in less than half a month, she squandered it all. At that time, Lu Buwang didn't know that Mu Hongjin was the beloved daughter of King Meng Ji, and he only despised her extravagant and lascivious life. She didn't care what Lu Buwang thought of her. She had so much money, and she insisted that he enjoy it with her. Half a month later, Mu Hongjin had spent all her money, so she had to eat with Lu Buwang. In the inn, they slept in the simplest kind, and the food was also very ordinary. Mu Hongjin didn't have money to buy the trinkets on the street. After half a day, she protested to Lu Buwang, "Young hero, can't we have a good meal?" No. Lu Buwang didn't have much money. The 7 disciples of Taoist Yunji went down the mountain to gain experience. Although it was said that they went down the mountain to gain experience, in fact, they were just experiencing the secular world. As for what they did in daily life, his senior fellow apprentices gave him some of the work they had received before. To put it bluntly, they took the money from others and had to eliminate disasters for others. It was just that their sect was not allowed to do evil or curry favor for personal gain. So much so that in the end, what they really did was to help the tenants of the farmstead find their lost sheep or help a married girl send a secret letter back to her maiden home. These kinds of trivial matters, and the money they received was also very little. Sometimes, they even had to help people write letters to their families. They didn't refuse anyone and accepted everything. A cold and otherworldly young man in white walked on the path of the farmstead with a lost sheep. The scene was a little funny. Mu Hongjin laughed at him. "What kind of sect do you belong to? Why do you have to do everything? Why don't you follow me?" You what?" Lu Buwang asked her angrily. Mu Hongjin rolled her beautiful eyes. "I'll pay you more than he does." Lu Buwang was so angry that he didn't want to speak. But it was true. After all, he hadn't finished the task his senior fellow apprentice gave him. Because he was doing these small things, he didn't get much money. If he was alone, it would be fine. But now that Mu Hongjin was with him, he had spent all his money. One person had become 2 people. In meals. Life was so tight that he wished he could split a copper coin in half to spend it. It could be seen that Mu Hongjin was also trying her best to adapt to this rough life. She made a fuss for a few days, but when she saw that Lu Buwang was really a little angry, she didn't dare to say anything more. She honestly lived a simple life with Lu Buwang. But her habit of wanting to buy everything she saw in her bones still hadn't changed. Lu Buwang still remembered that one day, they met an old woman selling flowers beside a tea house outside Jiang City. There were 2 bamboo baskets and a carrying pole in front of the old woman, and the bamboo baskets were full of wild chrysanthemums. They were slender and lovely, light pink and white. They were also very cheap. They should have been picked directly from the foot of Qian Mountain. Mu Hongjin leaned over to take a look. Seeing this, the old woman said with a smile, "Young master, buy me a flower to wear." "No need." Okay. The 2 of them spoke at the same time. Lu Buwang gave Mu Hongjin a warning look, and Mu Hongjin pursed her lips aggrievedly. The old woman smiled, picked a flower from the bamboo basket, and gave it to Mu Hongjin. "You're pretty, so this flower is for you. Wear it on your head. It's very beautiful." Mu Hongjin took it happily. She said sweetly with a smile, "Thank you, Granny." In this case, Lu Buwang couldn't just leave, so he took out a copper coin from his sleeve and handed it to the old woman. No. The old woman looked at him with a smile. "The little girl is cute. I like her. Young master, just treat her better in the future." Lu Buwang turned his head. Mu Hongjin got the flower and put it on her ear happily. She asked Lu Buwang, "Is it beautiful?" Lu Buwang said uncomfortably, "It has nothing to do with me." Mu Hongjin glared at him, squatted down, and looked at the jewelry and cosmetics in the carrying pole. After a while, she picked up a silver bracelet and exclaimed, "This is beautiful." It was a very simple silver bracelet. It seemed to have been roughly polished by someone, and even the edges were not very smooth. On the edge of the bracelet, a circle of lifelike wild chrysanthemums was carved, so it looked fresh and lovely. "This is so beautiful," Mu Hongjin praised. "This is called a happy bracelet. It was carved by my husband and me together." The old woman said with a smile, "Give one to your sweetheart and wear it for the rest of your life. Young master, why don't you buy one for me? It will last forever." "Did you hear that, young hero Lu?" Mu Hongjin begged, "Quickly give me one." Lu Buwang looked at her coldly, took the silver bracelet from her hand, and put it back into the carrying pole. Then, he said coldly to the old woman, "She's not my sweetheart." A trace of disappointment flashed through Mu Hongjin's eyes. In the end, she didn't take the silver bracelet again and muttered, "How do you know that I'm not your sweetheart?" "How do you know?" "Yes, how do I know?" The young man was proud and didn't understand that the joy of youth came quietly. By the time he understood, it had already become a calamity and there was no way to avoid it. Later, many years had passed. Lu Buwang often thought that if he had bought the silver bracelet in front of Mu Hongjin and put it on her hand that day, they wouldn't have come to that point. As the old woman said, they wouldn't have been separated for the rest of their lives. It was ridiculous that he also believed that strange forces and gods were predestined. The moonlight sprinkled on the ground, forming a layer of white frost. The bell in his memory gradually faded away, and only the wind in Jiang City that had been separated for many years fell in his ears. It was lonely and a little cold in his heart. "Do you like Xiaoju?" The unexpected voice interrupted He Yan's contemplation. He Yan turned his head in surprise. Lu Buwang retracted his gaze and looked at her with a knowing smile. He repeated again, "He, do you like Xiaoju?" "No." He Yan subconsciously retorted. After a while, she asked again, "Master, why do you say that? Haven't you noticed?" Lu Buwang said lightly, "When you're around him, you're very relaxed. You trust him more than you trust me." He Yan was stunned. Did she? Maybe she did. Whether it was in the previous life or this life, she might have many misunderstandings about Xiaoju's appearance in her heart. Whether he was indifferent or bad, she had never doubted that Xiaoju would hurt her from the beginning to the end. He Yan, who seemed to be careless about everything, always maintained a sense of vigilance in her heart. She didn't let go of this vigilance when facing Lu Buwang, Su Zhiheng, He Rufei, and even He Sui and his son who had no attacking power in the He family. But she always trusted Xiaoju. It's not time or experience that makes you so relaxed now. It's him. Lu Buwang's voice was gentle. Do you still want to deny it? He Yan didn't speak. After a while, she raised her head and looked at the moon hanging on the roof. The moon was big and white, and its silver light sprinkled over the whole yard, gently watching the people in the night. "Master, look at the moon in the sky," she said slowly. "It can shine on the backyard of the rich and the ditch in the wilderness. But you can't catch it, right? I can't catch the moon, nor can I make the moon come for me, so I can just stand here and look at it from afar." Chapter 149. When He Yan returned to the room, the lights were still on. The two maidservants were lying on the side of the room, playing with a flower rope. When they saw He Yan, they quickly stood up and greeted, "Madam." He Yan whispered, "It's nothing. You can sleep. I'm going to rest." "Is young master asleep?" Cui Jiao shook her head. "Young master has been reading." He Yan nodded, "I know. You should rest early too." She pushed the door open and entered the room. Xiaoju was sitting at the table, flipping through a long scroll in his hand. He was only wearing his inner garment. The snow-white garment hung loosely on his shoulders, revealing his jade-like skin. His collarbone was thin and as beautiful as the moon. He Yan closed the door and walked to his side. "Governor?" he asked. Xiaoju only raised her eyes and glanced at her indifferently without saying a word. "I thought you were asleep." He Yan removed the whip from her waist and hung it on the wall. The colorful tassel hanging from the handle of the whip swayed with her movements. The red pomegranate flower was even more exquisite and very eye-catching. Xiaoju's gaze fell on the colorful tassel. He Yan saw that Xiaoju was looking at it, so she took off the whip and handed it to him. What do you think? Commander, does it look good? This is a gift from 4th young Master Chu. Chu Xilan is so generous. Xiaoju narrowed her eyes and said calmly, it's such an expensive gift. He doesn't think it's a waste to give it to you. Expensive? He Yan asked curiously. 4th young Master Chu said that this pomegranate flower is fake jade and isn't worth much. I accepted it because he said so. Oh. He raised his eyebrows and said mockingly, he's very considerate. Is it really that expensive? He Yan was a little uneasy. Then I'll return it to him tomorrow. If there were any unclean things in the future, such as money, it was better to be clear about it. Xiaoju said, just accept it. Don't you like him very much? He Yan was shocked. Do I like him? Why didn't she know? I didn't want to meddle in your business, but I still have to remind you. The young man's eyebrows were unbelievably handsome under the light. His eyes were dark and deep, with a hint of inexplicable coldness. Chu Xilan is Su Jingfu's son-in-law. If you don't want to die, stay away from him. Su Pingting was the apple of Su Jingfu's eye. She seemed to like Chu Xilan. Lin Shuanghe had told her about it before. But what did it have to do with her? Not to mention whether she liked Chu Xiao or not, Chu Xiao was such a refined and polite person. He would definitely not like a woman who sat cross-legged on the bed and practiced boxing. Xiaoju was worried for nothing. Commander-in-Chief, I think you're too anxious about 4th young Master Chu. You're even prejudiced against me. She squeezed to Xiaoju's side and bent down to look at the scroll in Xiaoju's hand. It's so late. What are you looking at? Xiaoju ignored her. He Yan stood behind him and craned his neck to look. After a while, he said, it's a military defense map. What do you think? Do you see any problems? The way you speak, Xiaoju said calmly, makes it sound like you're the commander-in-chief. He Yan immediately withdrew his hand from his shoulder and moved a stool to sit beside him. He said, I'm just too concerned. The Yuto will soon know that Princess Meng Ji has been evacuating the citizens of Jiang City these past few days. Once the Yuto receive the news, they will soon mobilize their troops. He Yan had a headache. But there are too few soldiers in Jiang City. Since the Yuto dared to attack the city, they must have brought no less than 100,000 soldiers, 20,000 against 100,000. These 20,000 soldiers were the city gate guards who had not fought in many years. No matter how one looked at it, the situation was not very comforting. Weren't you a female general in your previous life? Xiaoju leaned back in his chair and twitched the corner of his mouth. Tell me what to do. He Yan was stunned. What was this? He was obviously telling the truth, but it was treated as a lie. In the military defense map, they came from the water. He Yan said, since that's the case, we can only attack with water. After saying this, she carefully raised her eyes to look at Xiaoju's expression. The young man's expression was as calm as ever. The wine sword hanging on the wall was sparkling like snow and was as cold as ice. Strangely enough, she and Xiaoju had a life and death experience in the water. When it came to water, there was always a shadow in their hearts. The other was that their first battle was a water battle. To him, attacking with water was not a good memory. However, they were in Jiang City. No matter what, they could not avoid such a battle. He Yan suspected that she and Xiaoju were fire spirits in their previous lives. They had such an ill-fated relationship with water. Tomorrow morning, I will go to the martial arts field to train the soldiers. Xiaoju said, you should go too. Me? He Yan hesitated. I really want to go, but won't Princess Meng Ji be unhappy? In name, Xiaoju was Dewey's right military commander. No one could train soldiers better than him. However, He Yan was only Xiao Ju's subordinate. Don't worry about her. Xiao Ju said, you should go with me. It was late at night. A man sat in front of the long table in the room and quietly looked at the basket of flowers on the table. The sugar paintings were red and sparkling under the warm light of the oil lamp. The flowers in the basket were dense and luxuriant. In front of the basket, there were 2 words written, Zilan. Upright and beautiful. A smiling voice seemed to ring in his ears. Zhao means light, while Zilan means vanilla. The person who gave you this name must have loved you very much and hoped that you would have a bright future. That's why they gave you such an elegant name. The person who gave him this name must have loved him very much. Chu Zhao never thought so. His mother was called Yu Runmei. She was the daughter of a small official in Qin County. She was as beautiful as a fairy. His memory was the same. She was a woman with impeccable features. She was beautiful, charming, and pitiful. In her delicate posture, there was a hint of innocence and nobility. He would never forget such a beauty even if he saw her once. Many men in Qin County wished to marry Yu Runmei, but Yu Runmei had taken a fancy to the equally handsome Shijinbo, Chu Linfeng, who came to Qin County to work. Even in Shuajing, Chu Linfeng was a rare handsome man. In addition, he was generous with his money and had been in the midst of women for so many years. He knew very well how to please people. Not long after, Yu Runmei secretly fell in love with this romantic and considerate young Master Chu. Not only did she fall in love with him, but she also spent a good night with him. However, in only 3 months, Chu Linfeng had to leave Qin County and return to Shuajing. Before leaving, Chu Linfeng told Yu Runmei that he would come back to marry her. At that time, Yu Runmei was immersed in her dream of waiting for her sweetheart to marry her. She didn't realize that other than knowing Chu Linfeng's name and where he lived in Shuajing, she knew nothing about him. After Chu Linfeng left, there was no more news about him. Not long after he left, Yu Runmei found out that she was pregnant. She was anxious and scared. She didn't dare to tell anyone. However, her belly grew bigger day by day. In the end, she couldn't hide it. Master Yi was furious. He asked Yu Runmei who the father of the child was. Yu Runmei didn't even know the father's true identity. How could she say it clearly? She could only cry non-stop. In the end, Master Yi had no choice but to call a doctor. He planned to abort the child in Yu Runmei's belly. After 1.5 years, he would send Yu Runmei to get married. This matter would rot in her belly forever. Yu Runmei knew her father's plan and ran away that night. She didn't want to abort the child. She didn't know if it was because she missed Chu Linfeng or because of other reasons. Anyway, she ran away. Yu Runmei decided to go to Shuajing to find Chu Linfeng. She was a pregnant woman. How could she walk so far? However, because of her beauty, she met a merchant along the way. He took the initiative to help her and agreed to take her to Shuajing. Before they reached Shuajing, Yu Runmei gave birth. Chu Zhao was born at this time. After Chu Zhao was born, Yu Runmei's miserable days had just begun. The merchant wasn't a kind person. He liked Yu Runmei's beauty and wanted her to be his concubine. Yu Runmei refused and scratched the merchant. In anger, the merchant sold Yu Runmei to a brothel for 10 taels of silver. Chu Zhao was also sold. The brothel mother thought that since Yu Runmei was so beautiful, her son wouldn't be bad either. If he was good-looking in the future, she might be able to earn another sum of money. If he wasn't good-looking, it wouldn't be a loss to be a servant. Yu Runmei and Chu Zhao lived together in the brothel. The pampered and spoiled young miss didn't know the evils of the world. In the brothel, she saw all kinds of ugly and evil people. It was as if they wanted to take back everything she had in the past. Yu Runmei's life was worse than death. The long-term torture changed her temperament. She became irritable and irritable. She didn't dare to be rash in front of her clients, but she vented her anger in front of Chu Xiao. She often beat Chu Xiao. If it wasn't for the protection of the other girls in the brothel, Chu Xiao felt that he wouldn't have lived to see Chu Linfeng. Chu Xiao didn't understand what Yi Runmei's feelings for him were. If she didn't love him, then she left home alone to protect the flesh and blood in her belly. She suffered a lot, but she didn't give up on him. If she loved him, then why did she say those heart-wrenching words to him? Her eyes were full of hatred. She always hit him with the bamboo pole and said, "I hate you. If it wasn't for you, my life wouldn't be like this. Why did you appear? Why don't you die?" After the vicious curses, she looked at the scars on Chu Xiao's body and hugged him. She cried, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Ah Zhao, Xilan, don't blame me. I feel sorry for you." He was at a loss when he was young. He didn't know whether he loved or not. He just looked at the crying woman and felt a trace of disgust. He hoped that these days would end soon. He hoped that he could grow up quickly and escape from this dirty and hopeless place. Yi Runmei wasn't the only one with such thoughts. She was also looking for an opportunity. She never gave up on finding Chu Linfeng. She cursed Chu Linfeng's heartlessness and was full of hope for him. She always looked at Chu Xiao as if she was looking at all the hope. Maybe she left Chu Xiao in the past so that one day when she saw Chu Linfeng again, she could stand in front of him and tell him, "This is your son." Then she would tell him all the hardships and sufferings in the past few years. Chu Linfeng would feel sorry for her and marry her as he said to her in the past. He would make up for what he owed her and her son all these years. Yi Runmei thought so, so she always took the initiative to entertain every guest from Shuajing. She was born beautiful and easily became the top beauty in the brothel. Although she wasn't in Shuajing, there were always people from Shuajing who came and went. One day, she actually met someone who knew Chu Linfeng. That person was Chu Linfeng's friend. At first, when he heard Yi Runmei talk about the sad past, he just thought it was fun and occasionally comforted her to satisfy his kindness as a savior. But when he heard that the person was called Chu Linfeng, was handsome, and was from Shuajing, his face gradually changed. Those who knew Chu Linfeng knew that he was a womanizer and was especially lecherous. It wasn't impossible for him to hook up with a woman from a small family when he was outside. But this matter wasn't done properly. In any case, she told the truth and let him give up. She didn't leave him in the same place and wait for so many years. Instead, it became an ill-fated relationship. My poor child. I don't know if he will have the chance to see his father in this life. Yi Runmei covered her face and cried. You have a child? The friend was shocked and asked, "Can I see him?" Yi Runmei let Chu Xiao out. Chu Xiao's nose and mouth were like Yi Runmei's, but his eyebrows and eyes were the same as Chu Linfeng's. They were gentle and affectionate. When he looked at people, he always seemed to have a gentle smile. If this face said that he was Chu Linfeng's son, no one would doubt it. The friend got up, said a few perfunctory words, and hurried out. Yi Runmei was very disappointed. When the friend returned to Shuajing, the first thing he did was to find Chu Linfeng at Count Shijin's residence and ask him if he had a brief relationship with a beauty many years ago in Qin County. Chu Linfeng thought for a long time and finally vaguely remembered that it was a very beautiful woman. Unfortunately, she was a little stupid and believed everything he said without a doubt. That woman is now living in a brothel, the friend said. She even gave birth to a son for you. I've seen that child. He looks very similar to you and is very beautiful. This was out of Chu Linfeng's expectations. Madame Chu was ugly and had never cared about his affairs outside. Thus, he was happy and at ease. He brought 19 concubines into the residence, all of whom were outstanding beauties. Unfortunately, Madame Chu only had one condition. He could take concubines, but the child had to crawl out of her womb. Madame Chu gave birth to 3 children. Chu Linfeng didn't have much interest in having more children, so he felt that it was enough. His only regret was that none of his 3 sons had inherited his looks. Their looks were mediocre. He knew that his colleagues and friends were laughing at him behind his back. He had been greedy for good looks all his life, but unfortunately, his sons were mediocre and not attractive enough. But now, someone had come to tell him that he actually had a son who was lost outside. Moreover, the son was very outstanding and looked very similar to him. To him, this was a good thing that fell from the sky. For a moment, he really wanted this child to acknowledge his ancestors. This way, if others said that he couldn't give birth to a good-looking son, he could ruthlessly slap them in the face. However, Chu Linfeng had been respectful to his wife for many years. Although Madame Chu looked dignified, she wasn't someone to be trifled with. Otherwise, the concubines in the Chu residence wouldn't have no sons. Chu Linfeng had no choice but to beg the old madam, his mother. Although Madame Chu didn't care much about a concubine's son, he was still the blood of the Chu family. It wasn't good for him to be wandering outside, especially in a brothel. Thus, she personally went to find Madame Chu. Madame Chu and the old madam talked for 2 hours. When they left the residence, Madame Chu personally ordered people to go to the brothel in Danzhou to bring the concubine's son back. However, that concubine's son didn't mention Yi Runmei. Although Shi Jinbo wasn't the most powerful person in the capital, he was still a high-ranking official. To the people of Danzhou, he was even more unreachable. When the letter flew from the capital to Danzhou, Yi Runmei almost couldn't believe her eyes. She knew that Chu Linfeng wasn't an ordinary person. He was so generous and his charm was especially different from the men in Qin County. His family background wasn't bad. However, she didn't expect him to be the current Shi Jinbo. He was someone she didn't even dare to think about in her life. It was as if she had endured and planned for this moment for many years and finally reaped the sweet fruit. She hugged Chu Zhao and cried with joy. "Xilan, your father is here to pick us up. We can go home now." Chu Zhao quietly allowed the woman's emotional tears to fall on his neck. His young face was indifferent to his age. Go home. Who could be sure that this was just jumping from one fire pit to another? After all these years in the brothel, the men he saw were all greedy and evil, and the women were all stupid and weak. There was no difference. However, Yi Runmei didn't think so. She spent all her savings to buy many beautiful clothes and jewelry. She dressed Chu Zhao like a young master from a rich family and dressed herself like a charming flower. She looked at the woman in the mirror. She was still beautiful, but her skin wasn't as smooth as when she was young. There was no more innocence in her eyes, no more coquettish. She cried. Spring was as beautiful as before, but the beauty was past her prime. And the man who promised to marry her hadn't come yet. Yi Runmei thought that since Chu Linfeng was Shi Jinbo, he definitely wouldn't marry her, but it would be good to make her a concubine. Her son was also Shi Jinbo's son. She had been living a hard life in the brothel all these years. Being a concubine of an official was more noble than being a prostitute here. She wanted to dress herself up beautifully. When she saw Chu Linfeng, she wanted to tell him how much she suffered for him all these years. She wanted to tell him how much she loved him. Yi Runmei thought that she was clever. Any man in the world would feel proud when he heard that a beauty was infatuated with him. And this pride would make him feel more tender and doting on the beauty, so as to show his heroic feelings. She wouldn't let go of this opportunity. She wanted to regain Chu Linfeng's favor. Even if she was only a concubine, she wanted to be the one who attracted him the most. However, Yi Runmei didn't expect that Chu Linfeng didn't come. It was 2 women and a group of servants who came. They looked at Yi Runmei condescendingly. They couldn't help but look at her with contempt. It was as if they would dirty their eyes if they looked at her more. The leading woman asked, "Where is young Master Chu?" Yi Runmei felt humiliated. She wanted to get angry, but in the end, she put on a humble smile. He's changing in the next room. She had told Chu Zhao in advance to put in the jade hairpin to make her look elegant and cute. Good. The woman lowered her eyes and smiled insincerely. Yi Runmei felt uneasy. She asked, "What do you want to do?" One woman came over and pulled her hand back. Another servant covered her mouth with a handkerchief. Yi Runmei's eyes widened. She realized what they were going to do to her. She struggled with all her might and said angrily, "How dare you, how dare you? Aren't you afraid that Chu Linfeng will find out? Chu Linfeng will kill you." The woman looked at her coldly. Her smile was bone-chilling. "We don't dare to make such a big decision without the master's permission. Miss May." She called Yi Runmei by her name in the brothel. "Would our Count Shi Jinbo's mansion accept a prostitute who rides thousands of men in the brothel? Do you want people to laugh at the master, or do you want people to laugh at your son?" Yi Runmei struggled with all her might, but her body was slender and weak. How could she be a match for the woman? She gradually lost her strength. "Getting rid of the mother and keeping the son is already a gift to you." Yi Runmei's legs gradually stopped moving. She fell straight to the ground with her eyes wide open. She had waited for her husband all her life. She was so happy that she thought she had made it, but she was waiting for death. Chu Zhao put in the hairpin and looked around in the mirror for a long time. Then, he walked to his mother's room. He wanted to knock on the door, but when he reached out his hand, he hesitated. He gently pushed the door a little to see what his father looked like. Then he saw two old women carrying Yi Runmei as if they were carrying a dead pig. They hung a piece of white silk on the beam and covered Yi Runmei's head with it. Yi Runmei's face was facing the door. Her eyes met his. Surrounded by pearls and jade, beautiful snow and red makeup, holding hatred toward the netherworld, unwilling to close her eyes even in death. He staggered and covered his mouth to prevent himself from screaming. The people in the room were still talking. "She is beautiful, but how can she be so stupid? She still wants to marry into the family. She didn't even think about it. Which rich family would accept a woman from a brothel as a concubine? After all, she came from a small family. She doesn't know what it means to get rid of the mother and keep the son. If she had stayed in Qin County, she wouldn't have lost her life. TSK, she's just greedy." Chu Zhao slowly retreated. When he was far enough away from the door, he suddenly ran. He didn't know which family he was in, but he closed the door tightly. He gritted his teeth and silently cried. A woman's voice seemed to fall into his ears. It had a rare gentleness. "Beautiful clothes like a hero's, rotten clothes like a bright star. From now on, you will be called Ah Zhao. One day, our Ah Zhao will be like Almighty Yun. Wearing beautiful clothes, looking beautiful and brilliant. As for the character, let's call you Xylan. Orchid is beautiful and fragrant. Mother, I used to love orchids the most." He innocently said, "In the future, Zhao will buy many, many orchids for mother." The woman's laughter gradually faded away. His eyes fell on the flower basket in front of him. The fire was slightly hot. Chu Zhao paused for a moment, then threw the flower basket on the table into the fire. The flame licked the basket. After a while, the syrup flowed everywhere, giving off a burnt sweetness. He walked away expressionlessly. Chapter 150. The next morning, He Yan and Xiao Ju had an early breakfast and went to Jiang City's martial arts practice field to see the Jiang City's army. Lin Shuanghe didn't follow them and rested in the Cui mansion. Lu Buwang continued to track down the whereabouts of those Yuto and went out at the same time as He Yan and Xiao Ju. There were many rivers in Jiang City, and the city was built on the water. The water cut the flat land into several large and small pieces, so it wasn't easy to find large open spaces. The martial arts practice field was built close to the prince's mansion for no other reason than that there was a large open space here. When He Yan and Xiao Ju went over, they met Cui Yuezhi. When Cui Yuezhi saw the two of them, he smiled and cupped his hands. "Military Governor Xiao. As if he could see He Yan's surprise, Cui Yuezhi patted Xiao Zhu's shoulder with a smile. Actually, I started to suspect you the second day you came to Jiang. Even my concubine could tell that you really don't look like anyone from the Cui family at all. How could you be my eldest brother's son? It's just that when I brought you into the prince's mansion, His Highness often called you in, so he must have known your identities long ago. Since His Highness has plans, I can only pretend to be stupid and not say anything. This Cui Yuezhi was quite smart. He chuckled, but there was a shrewd look in his eyes on his simple and honest face. If His Highness thinks I'm stupid, then I'll be stupid. There's nothing wrong with being stupid. He Yan understood that Cui Yuezhi could become Mu Hongjin's confidant not only because he was brave, but also because he was Qing Mei's childhood sweetheart. It was because he was stupid at the right time. With such a simple and honest subordinate, of course, she had to trust him and put him in an important position. He was a very wise person. Cui Yuezhi looked at Xiao Zhu again. His Highness told me that all the Jiang city's army will listen to Military Governor Zhao's command from today onwards. His expression became serious. His Highness has already told me about the Yudo. I will do my best to cooperate with Military Governor Xiao. The citizens of Jiang City are still under the protection of Military Governor Xiao. Has your Highness already begun to move the citizens of the city? He Yan asked. From today onwards, it's just that. Cui Yuezhi sighed. It won't be easy. The citizens of the city were used to living here peacefully. When they received news that Jiang was in trouble and had to evacuate the city, they naturally panicked. The younger ones were still fine. Those who were sick, old, and had no one to take care of them could not leave. How could those who owned businesses and shops in the city be at ease to leave everything behind? However, Cui Yuezhi perked up. I've always heard that General Feng Yun is invincible on the battlefield. This Cui has long wanted to meet her. I didn't expect Military Governor Xiao to be so young and handsome. He was half envious and half amazed. How can there be such a person favored by the heavens in this world? He Yan, this kind of experience of favoritism was probably something that ordinary people couldn't bear. As he spoke, he had already walked to the side of the training field. As Jiang City was close to the water and had not fought a war for many years, the soldiers did not have armor. They only wore cloth armor. The cloth armor was green, and each of them held a long spear. It was probably because they did a lot of manual labor that they all looked mighty and powerful. However, He Yan could tell at a glance that their military formation was not lethal. It was like a decorative frame, and it was a somewhat old-fashioned decorative frame. All these years, Mu Hongjin probably didn't spend much effort on the training of the city's army. However, this was understandable. Ever since King Meng Ji's generation, Jiang had been at peace with Luan. Not to mention fighting wars, they were even good at stealing and swindling in the city. The people were simple and honest, so there was no need to spend much effort on this. Be prepared for danger in times of peace. He Yan shook his head. Jiang City army has been slacking off for too long. Cui Yuezhi looked at He Yan. He had already found out from Mu Hongjin that He Yan was Xiao Zhu's subordinate. However, he thought that the subordinate was Xiao Zhu's servant, a delicate wife, that was prepared to fit the identity of Xiao Huanqing better during this trip to Jiang. Although he was puzzled midway and thought that this servant's relationship with Xiao Zhu was a little too casual, he was curious when he heard He Yan's words. Yu Yan, do you see anything? Cui Zhongqi, my surname is He, and my name is Yan. I can't see anything else, but I feel that the military formation of Jiang City's city army is a little old-fashioned. In Shuajing, we stopped fighting like this a few years ago. Miss Yan, Cui Yuezhi puffed out his chest and said disapprovingly, when setting up a military formation, it doesn't mean that the newer the better. It also depends on whether it's suitable for use or not. This military formation is something that I came up with after discussing with my colleagues in the army. It's very suitable for Jiang's terrain. How can you say that it's old-fashioned? He did not dare to boast that he was better than Xiao Zhu, but he was still better than Xiao Zhu's subordinates. A good military formation could only be created after many years. He Yan was not talking about a new dish. Who would be able to change it every few days just for the sake of freshness? He Yan saw that the military formation was full of loopholes, so she did not want to criticize him. She glanced at Xiao Ju again. Seeing that Xiao Ju did not say anything, she did not have any intention of objecting. She thought for a while and said tactfully, "Let's not talk about the military formation. Just based on the movements of the city army, it looks more like they're practicing. I'm afraid that they're lacking something on the battlefield." "What are they lacking?" Cui Yuezhi asked. "Dauntless." He Yan said, "These city army soldiers can only deal with soldiers who are weaker than them or soldiers who are on par with them. If there are soldiers who are more ferocious and brutal than them." He Yan shook her head. "I'm afraid that they won't be able to win." As they spoke, they had already walked to the front of the training field. He Yan's words fell into the ears of the soldiers at the front. The young man standing at the front was holding a long spear and thrusting it forward. When he heard what He Yan said, he could not help but glance at her. When Cui Yuezhi heard He Yan say that about his soldiers, he was a little unconvinced. "Miss Yan, you make it sound like the Jiang army is made of tofu." He Yan was not lying. This batch of Jiang City army soldiers had probably not been to a real battlefield. They were even weaker than the new recruits of the Liang province guards. After living a peaceful life for a long time, even a tiger's claws would lose their strength. Moreover, Yuto came prepared. They would not be as weak as a lamb. "I'm just a little worried," He Yan said. "Miss," suddenly, someone spoke. He Yan turned her head to look. The one who spoke was the young man who held a spear and stood at the head of the group. His skin had been tanned by the sun and his appearance was very handsome. He didn't fear Xiao Ju, who was standing at the side at all. He looked at He Yan and coldly said, "What do you mean by saying that our city's army is worthless? Although Jiang City has been peaceful for many years, the city army has been training hard every day. They don't dare to slack off for even a day. Miss, you haven't been there yet, so it's better not to jump to conclusions so easily." He Yan said, "I'm not jumping to conclusions so easily." The young man did not know He Yan, nor did he know Xiao Ju's identity. He thought that Cui Yuezhi had brought his nephew and niece-in-law here to observe the soldiers. He was probably young and did not know how to hide his emotions. He also felt a little indignant, so he said to He Yan, "How can a woman understand the affairs of men in the army?" He Yan was speechless. He Yan thought to himself, if this woman really gets angry, even 10 men in the army won't be enough to fight her. If Jiang City's army faced Yudo with such arrogance, there was no way they could win this war. She was thinking about how to tactfully destroy this person's momentum when she suddenly heard Xiao Ju's voice. "If that's the case, you can compete with her." He Yan looked at Xiao Ju. The soldier who spoke was also a little surprised. He did not expect him to make such a lousy suggestion. "This isn't good, right?" He Yan said hesitantly. The soldier felt a little comforted. He thought that this woman was tactful. Before he could say anything else, he heard He Yan's remaining words, "You're still Cui Zhongqi's soldiers. What if you destroy his morale and he can't recover in the future?" Cui Yuezhi was speechless. He was also thinking that Xiao Ju's suggestion was too hasty. Now that he heard He Yan's words, he really didn't know what to say. Cui Yuezhi was also a martial arts practitioner, but he couldn't directly touch He Yan's bone structure. Just from his appearance, He Yan was thin and weak, and he couldn't see anything powerful about him. Xiao Ju said that this girl should know some martial arts. However, compared to Mu Yi, she might be too arrogant. Looking at her thin arms and legs, Mu Yi could easily break her arms. He Yan looked at Xiao Ju. Under the morning light of the martial arts arena, the young man's figure was like jade. The black python on his dark blue robe was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, adding to his heroic spirit. The arrow sleeves were convenient for holding weapons. Here, He was no longer the second son of the Shao family. He was the commander-in-chief of the Right Army, General Feng Yun. Mu Yi, the soldier, didn't say anything. He Yan looked at him and smiled. What do you think? Little brother, do you want to fight with me? She was still wearing the red riding uniform of the women of Jiang and black boots. The whip hanging in front of her chest was delicate and cute. She looked lively and harmless. She was no different from the countless young ladies in Jiang who picked flowers and sniffed them in the spring. Most young men always had a competitive spirit. If a girl provoked them verbally, and a pretty girl at that, they would always want to prove themselves. Mu Yi was the same. He thought that he had already given this girl a chance, but she didn't want to give up. He had no choice but to let her have a taste of the power of the Jiang army. Thinking of this, Mu Yi cupped his hands and said, "Excuse me." He Yan faintly smiled. She flipped over and leaped up, stepping onto the wooden stake beside her. The bystanders only saw a red swallow. In the blink of an eye, it had already landed on the empty space in the center of the martial arts field. She slowly pulled out the purple jade whip from her waist and made a "please" gesture. The layman watched for the excitement, while the expert watched for the skill. Her appearance was already unusual. Mu Yi was slightly surprised, but he didn't want to be outdone. He followed her and stood in front of He Yan. One man, one spear, one woman, and one whip. In the blink of an eye, they were entangled in a fight. The surrounding Jiang soldiers had already put down their spears and were staring at them intently. Each army had its own characteristics. For example, the South Mansion soldiers were orderly and serious, the Yangzhou guards were free and straightforward, and the Jiang soldiers were lively and lively. It was as if they were watching a show. They immediately became excited. Good. Good fight. Mu Yi, why can't you do it? Don't go easy on her. Good job, Mississippi beat this brat to death. For a moment, the cheers were endless. Cui Yuezhi stared at the red figure in the middle of the fight. The whip in her hand was like moving clouds and flowing water, winding like lightning. He was extremely surprised. Mu Yi was one of the most outstanding soldiers in the Jiang army. Not to mention how good he was in the army, he was considered one of the best among the people here. However, even Mu Yi was at a disadvantage when facing He Yan. Others thought that Mu Yi was holding back because his opponent was a girl. However, Cui Yuezhi's eyes were sharp. He could tell at a glance that Mu Yi didn't stand a chance. The girl's whip was too fast, and her footwork was too fast. Mu Yi didn't have a chance to attack. If this continued, he would soon be defeated. Cui Yuezhi couldn't help but ask Xiao Ju, Military Governor Xiao, "Is Miss He really your subordinate?" He couldn't find a single subordinate like her in the Jiang army. It really made people jealous. "It's not unfair for your subordinate to lose to the number 1 Liangzhou guard," Xiao Ju said calmly. Number 1 Liangzhou guard? Cui Yuezhi didn't understand, but He Yan was a girl. Could it be that she had fought with the Liangzhou guard before? On the stage, Mu Yi was in a sorry state. Beads of sweat gradually seeped out of his forehead. The girl looked delicate, but her movements were swift and unparalleled. She predicted every move he made. Her movements were also fast, as if she didn't know fatigue. Most importantly, how could a girl have such great strength? With a crack, the whip struck the stone pile beside him. A corner of the stone pile was broken, and the flying gravel brushed past Mu Yi's face. Mu Yi couldn't believe his eyes. That was a stone pile. Normally, even a sword might not be able to break it, but she used a whip. Not only did the whip not break, but He Yan also looked relaxed. What kind of logic was this? Mu Yi naturally didn't know that when He Yan was in the Liangzhou guard, the number of days she threw stone locks was counted in months. He Yan wasn't targeting anyone. In terms of strength, no one present was a match for her. While Mu Yi was thinking, a long whip was already in front of him. He was so shocked that he immediately used the spear in his hand to block it. There was a crack in the air, and the spear actually broke into 2 pieces. The surrounding Jiang army quieted down. They could only hear the girls' laughter echoing in the field. The last 3 strikes. The first strike told you not to look down on girls. Mu Yi was flustered. He grabbed the long broken spear and continued to block. Crack. There was another crack. The broken spear in his hand broke into pieces again. The strong girl tilted her head and sighed. The second strike is arrogant and conceited. It's a big taboo in battle. Mu Yi only had a spearhead less than the length of a palm in his hand. He was defenseless for a moment. The third strike was already in front of him, and he couldn't dodge it. The third strike. Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. When the long whip rushed in front of him, it mischievously curled up and landed in his hand, taking away the spearhead in his hand. When Mu Yi came back to his senses, the girl in the red dress was already playing with his iron spearhead. She walked over and patted his shoulder, returning the spearhead to him. She smiled and said, "There's always someone better than you. Young man, you have to continue to work hard." She walked past Mu Yi and left with a smile. His companions crowded around him and asked, "It can't be, right? Brother Mu, aren't you losing too quickly? Did you deliberately show mercy? How can you be so unambitious? Don't talk nonsense." Mu Yi was angry. "I didn't show mercy." His companions looked at each other. Someone said, "Didn't show mercy? Is she really that powerful? That's impossible." Another person pointed at his face and said, "Mu Yi, why is your face red?" The noise in the distance fell into his ears, but Cui Yuezhi wasn't in the mood to teach them a lesson. He only sighed. How fast time passed. It hadn't even been half an hour. He defeated the most outstanding person in the Jiang army just like that. Cui Yuezhi could clearly see that He Yan didn't use her full strength. Otherwise, if her whip wasn't aimed at Mu Yi's spear, but at Mu Yi himself, Mu Yi would have suffered a lot. Military Governor Shao has a good subordinate, Cui Yuezhi said sincerely. When he thought of what he said just now, he was a little worried. The Jiang army is not as good as the Liangzhou guards, but the Liangzhou guards have already fought with the Yudo once. He Yan happened to walk over and said, "The Yudo's savagery and cunning are beyond Cui Zhongqi's imagination. They definitely won't be as merciful as I was just now. If the Jiang army can't win, it will be a disaster for the people in the city." Cui Yuezhi shuddered. "The most important problem isn't the city guards," Xiao Ju said. "Then what is it?" "Jiang has a lot of water. The Yudo can only attack with water. This battle is destined to be fought on water. The reason why your army formation is outdated is because it isn't used for water attacks." Cui Yuezhi frowned. "Can you be more specific, Commander-in-Chief?" He Yan looked at Xiao Ju. She was a little excited. She didn't expect Xiao Ju to have the same idea as her. The young man lowered his eyes. "The boat." The most important thing was the boat. In the attic, the man looked away and smiled with his head lowered. Ing Xiang said softly, "I didn't expect Miss He to be so skilled." Although she already knew that He Yan was one of the best in the Liangzhou guards, she had never seen it with her own eyes. It was hard to imagine that the girl who fought with others in the training field was more dazzling than when she stood quietly as a woman. Although they were both beauties, Ing Xiang felt that He Yan's beauty was especially special among all the women in the world. However, because of this uniqueness, there weren't as many people who admired her as there were people who admired the beauty of the secular world. "Fourth young master," Ing Xiang said, "Princess Meng Ji has started to evacuate the citizens in the city today. Do you want to go with her? Teacher sent me to Jiang to keep an eye on Xiao Huijin. Since Xiao Huijin is here, how can I evacuate by myself?" Chu Zhao's gaze fell on He Yan, who seemed to be talking to Xiao Ju in the distance. He smiled faintly. If Military Governor Xiao stays in Jiang, he can protect himself even if the Yudo comes. However, young master doesn't know martial arts. It will be dangerous for you to stay in the city. Ying Xiang wanted to persuade him again. The more dangerous it is, the more it proves my loyalty to teacher. Chu Zhao smiled carelessly. Ying Xiang, don't you understand? Teacher gave me two options when he assigned this task to me. One option is to die here. The other option is to live and complete the task and return to the capital. If I don't complete the task and return alive, I will still die. Do you understand? Ying Xiang was silent for a moment, then said, I understand. You don't need to worry. Chu Zhao looked into the distance with his hands behind his back. Besides, I have a good friend who knows martial arts. Since she is so righteous and naive, I think, she will protect my safety. Ying Xiang followed his gaze and looked at He Yan in the distance. She thought for a moment, then reminded him, young master, Miss He is military governor Zhao's subordinate. You also said that she is a subordinate. Chu Zhao smiled and said, there is no such thing as an unchanging relationship in the world. A loyal partner can become a terrifying enemy in the next moment. He had seen this kind of thing many times. People were fickle. In the prince's mansion, Mu Xiaolu jumped down the stone stairs with a box in her arms. She shouted, Grandmother. Mu Hongjin was sitting in the hall. When she heard her, she looked at her tiredly. What is it, Xiaolu? Aunt Tong told me to only take the important things, but I like everything. Mu Xiaolu said, Aunt Tong said that the carriage can't be put down. Grandmother, can you keep these for me first? When I return to Jiang, I will ask you for them. Mu Hongjin smiled and opened the box. There were some small toys in the box. There was a cricket made of wood, a spinning top, a small dog made of paper, and a whistle that would sing when blown. Most of them were things that Cui Yuezhi bought from the streets to please Mu Xiaolu. Some of them were things that Mu Xiaolu snatched from her peers who visited the mansion. These were also her treasures. Mu Hongjin closed the lid of the wooden box and handed it to the maid beside her. Okay, grandmother will keep them for me. When you return to Jiang, you can ask me for them. Mu Xiaolu nodded. Grandmother, you must take good care of them. Mu Hongjin laughed and tapped her forehead. I know, miser. Grandmother. Mu Xiaolu jumped onto the soft couch and hugged her waist. Why do I have to leave Jiang? I don't want to leave grandmother. Can I not attend Uncle Wang's birthday banquet? Nonsense. Mu Hongjin said, how can you not go? You're the future princess. Only you can represent Jiang. I don't want to go. The little girl acted shamelessly. How would I know what Uncle Wang looks like? How would I know if he is easy to get along with? What if he is very fierce? You won't. They will all treat you very well. Mu Hongjin patted her head. Her tone was gentle but a little strict. Xiaolu, you are not a child anymore. Grandmother can't accompany you forever. One day, you will have to take charge of many things by yourself. Grandmother can only be at ease when I see you grow up. I have to grow up slowly. Mu Xiaolu was puzzled. I am not a bamboo shoot at the mountain pass that will break through the soil overnight. Mu Hongjin was amused by her words. After laughing, her eyes were dyed with a layer of worry. There was no time. Yuto was hiding in the dark and had already made a move in the past few days. She had to send Mu Xiaolu out. Mu Xiaolu was the last hope of Jiang City. She had also prepared for the worst. It was a pity that she could not watch the little girl grow up and become her indestructible protection before she became an adult. But why were there so many regrets in the world? Chapter 151. Mu Xiaolu snuggled up to Mu Hongjin and chatted for a while before she was called away by Aunt Tong. The maid beside her helped Mu Hongjin to stand up. She took a few steps forward and walked to the painted wall with the murals. The hall was spacious and deserted. The only lively place was the painted wall. The market was crowded and the canal flowed. All the liveliness of Jiang City was painted on the wall. Everyone's faces were filled with joy and happiness. She hadn't seen this kind of liveliness for many years. After all, ever since she became the princess, the place she spent the most time in was this empty prince's mansion. Mu Xiaolu would be sent out of the city after today. The so-called Uncle Wang's birthday banquet was just a pretense. The vassals had not interacted with each other for many years. To avoid arousing His Majesty's suspicion, everyone settled down and the world was peaceful. Now that Yudo was hiding in the dark, a storm was brewing in Jiang. As the princess, she couldn't escape. She had to stay in the city and live and die with the people who couldn't escape. This was the Mu family's strength of character. However, Mu Xiaolu couldn't stay. She was Jiang's only hope. If the worst happened and only Mu Xiaolu survived, there was still hope. The lords have already ordered the evacuation of the people. The maid said softly, "Is your highness worried about the young highness?" Mu Hongjin smiled and shook her head, "I'm worried about Jiang City." The willow tree outside the window had long branches that were soaked in the green of spring. It stretched to the edge of the pond and created small ripples. The carps in the pond fought to be the first to peck at it. It was the same every spring. The only thing that changed was the people. When Mu Hongjin was young, she liked life outside the prince's mansion. As the youngest daughter of King Mengji, when her brother was still alive, she was pampered like the innocent pearl in the palms of all the wealthy families in Jiang. She lived a warm and lovely life. However, after her brother passed away when she was 16, her life changed. King Mengji started to make her learn many things and set many rules. At that time, Mu Hongjin truly understood how hard her brother's life was. However, it was hard work. King Mengji didn't have any other children. As the person who would bear the responsibility of the entire prince's mansion in the future, it was understandable that he suffered. However, Mu Hongjin found it hard to accept that even her marriage was controlled by someone else. Now that he thought about it, she was used to being spoiled at that time. She was young and impetuous, so she actually dared to leave. She did not realize at all that if she left her father alone in the prince's mansion, how would she deal with the ministers of the imperial court who would break off their engagement? If it was the current Mu Hongjin, she would not have such courage. The more he took on, the less freedom he would have as his self. The courage to risk everything would only come once in a lifetime. After that age, after that time, it would never come again. Together with his younger self, they disappeared into the long river of time. Mu Hongjin really liked Lu Buwang at first. The young man in white had a cold and cheerless temperament. He was upright and self-restrained, but sometimes he was naive and unsophisticated. He clearly had amazing skills and outstanding skills, but he could seriously find a sheep for a farmer and not complain at all. But Mu Hongjin thought that these so-called advantages, such as kindness and innocence, were all additional. She liked Lu Buwang. At the beginning, when Lu Buwang stood in front of her with a sword under the peach blossom tree and drove away those bad guys for her, it had started. The hero saved the beauty. In the legendary stories, many happy marriages had been created. She was determined to follow Lu Buwang. She acted shamelessly, cried, coaxed, and lied to him. She used all kinds of tricks on him. Unfortunately, Lu Buwang had always been cold and polite to her, and she didn't see any favor from him. Mu Hongjin was a little discouraged, but on second thought, compared to others, Lu Buwang was already good to her. He earned little money, but when they ate in the restaurant, he would order a plate of apricot cake for her. When they lived in the inn, he would spend more money to add a thicker mattress for her. He put the money in a conspicuous place and turned a blind eye to her secretly taking some money to buy rouge. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't have a good impression of her, he wouldn't have tolerated her to this extent. Therefore, Mu Hongjin always felt that with one more step and a little more time, Lu Buwang would fall in love with her sooner or later. Until Lu Buwang's junior sister came down the mountain to find him. The junior sister was called Yushu. She was different from the shrewish women in Jiang. She looked so weak as if a gust of wind could blow her away. Her skin was as white as a porcelain doll, like a child under the goddess of mercy. She was ethereal and spoke softly, which made people feel tender affection for her. But Mu Hongjin could see a hint of hostility in the girl's eyes. At that time, she was careless and didn't realize anything. When she heard that Yushu was the daughter of Taoist Yunji, she specially came down the mountain because she was afraid that Lu Buwang couldn't deal with the worldly affairs at the foot of the mountain, so she came to help him. Therefore, she had a good impression of her and treated her as a younger sister. Mu Hongjin didn't think it was a bad thing that two people became three people. Yushu was always obedient. Unlike her, she never caused trouble for Lu Buwang. More than a month passed in a flash. When it was time for Lu Buwang to return to Qian Mountain, he originally planned to take Mu Hongjin up the mountain with him. But who knew that both inside and outside Jiang City were investigating the missing little highness? The officers and soldiers were checking one by one, even at the foot of Qian Mountain. Mu Hongjin couldn't go up Qian Mountain. She pulled Lu Buwang into the room, looked at him seriously, and said, "I can't go back with you." The young man thought that she was playing tricks again, so he asked, "Why?" "Let me tell you." Mu Hongjin hesitated for a moment and told him the truth. "I'm the daughter of King Mengji. I'm the person the officers and soldiers in and outside the city are looking for." Lu Buwang was stunned. "My father wants to marry me to the son of an imperial court official to stabilize his position as a vassal. I don't want to, so I escaped. I didn't expect to meet you. I've been very happy this month." Lu Buwang. She didn't call him young hero, but directly called him by his name. "I don't want to marry him, but I can't go up the mountain with you. What should I do?" The girl was no longer as lively and mischievous as before. She looked at him quietly with complete trust in her eyes. Perhaps, there was also a little unknowingly dependence. Lu Buwang didn't know what to say. Perhaps he had long noticed that Mu Hongjin's identity was unusual. A noble girl living in King Mengji's mansion was somewhat different from a girl from an ordinary family in Jiang City. Lu Buwang thought for a long time and said to her, "In that case, wait for me in this inn. After I go up the mountain and tell my master about this, I'll go down the mountain to pick you up in 2 days and find a way to solve this matter." Mu Hongjin was a little reluctant. "Are you leaving now?" "I'll come back," the young man said uncomfortably. On the day he left, Mu Hongjin saw him off in the open space behind the inn. There was some uneasiness in her eyes, as if she had foreseen something. She couldn't help but grab Lu Buwang's sleeve and say to him, "Lu Buwang, remember what you said. You must come back. Don't worry." For the first and last time, he patted her head to comfort her. Lu Buwang and Yushu left, and Mu Hongjin waited for him in the inn obediently. She believed that Lu Buwang would definitely come back. Although Lu Buwang didn't like her yet, he was a man of his word. 2 days later, Lu Buwang didn't come back. Mu Hongjin was still waiting in the inn. She thought that maybe Lu Buwang was delayed by something on the way. It had rained for several days, and the mountain road was not easy to walk on. Maybe he couldn't go down the mountain immediately. Or maybe Taoist Yunji had something to tell him, and he couldn't come over until he finished it. Another 5 days passed, but Lu Buwang still didn't appear. Mu Hongjin began to feel a little anxious. The world was not peaceful. Could it be that he was robbed by bandits passing by? Although his swordsmanship was powerful, his heart was pure and kind. Even she could deceive him. How could he really fight against those insidious and dirty villains? On the 10th day, someone finally came to the inn. However, it wasn't Lu Buwang, but the soldiers. The head of the soldiers stood in front of her and said in a respectful and cold tone, "Your Highness, it's time to go home." Mu Hongjin was taken back to King Mengji's mansion. She was locked in the room. She banged on the window and shouted, "Let me out." No one answered. She began a hunger strike. Her father, King Mengji, ordered people to open the door. Mu Hongjin rushed to King Mengji and cried, "Father, how could you let them lock me up?" "Hongjin," King Mengji shook his head and said with a smile. He put the dishes on the maid's tray in front of her. "These are your favorite snacks." "I don't want to eat." Mu Hongjin turned her head away. "I want to leave the mansion." King Mengji didn't get angry. After a moment of silence, he asked, "Are you waiting for that young man surnamed Lu?" Mu Hongjin suddenly raised her head, and her eyes couldn't hide her surprise. "How do you know?" "He won't come back." "No, he will come back." Mu Hongjin couldn't help but say, "He promised me, and he won't break his promise." "Really?" King Mengji said lightly, "How do you think I found your whereabouts?" Mu Hongjin was stunned. The cruel words from her father's mouth instantly shattered the beautiful dream she had been deceiving herself. "It was he who told me where you were. He sent you back with his own hands." Why did Lu Buwang send her back to the mansion? Mu Hongjin didn't understand this question until later. She didn't want to believe King Mengji's words, but Lu Buwang seemed to have really disappeared from her life and never appeared again. Mu Hongjin gradually believed it later on. If such a person really wanted to inquire about a person, how could he not find a way? She had persisted for more than half a year, and she really couldn't hold on anymore. Half a year later, Mu Hongjin got married to the son of an important official in the court. Although she was married, she was called Prince Wang. The position of Prince Wang was stable, but the heir she gave birth to still took the surname Mu. Prince Wang was not as bad as Mu Hongjin said before, but he was not very outstanding either. The two lived a respectful life. When her husband took a concubine, she gladly accepted it. She was not jealous or jealous. Prince Wang also had a sense of propriety and treated her with respect. In the eyes of outsiders, this was the most beautiful marriage in the blind and mute marriage. However, Mu Hongjin felt that her liveliness and vitality had long since disappeared on that spring day like an epiphyllum that bloomed quickly and withered quickly. She always felt that her heart was empty, and she didn't know what she wanted. Therefore, she could only spend more time on the official affairs in Jiang City. A red carp jumped out of the water and stirred up the spring water. After a while, its red tail touched the surface of the water and quickly disappeared. Mu Hongjin stared at the water in a daze. She told He Yen that Lu Buwang didn't come to the inn to fulfill their agreement, and the two of them never saw each other again. In fact, she lied. After that, she actually met Lu Buwang again, but that meeting was really not a pleasant one. It was the second year after she gave birth to the child. She took her youngest son and Prince Wang to the treasure temple in Jiang City to pray for blessings. The Buddha statue Niao Niao, and the sound of Sanskrit spread far and wide. She prayed for her youngest son to grow up safely and healthily. She prayed for good weather in Jiang City and for the people to be happy. After praying for blessings, when she was about to leave, she saw that there seemed to be someone peeping outside the temple. Mu Hongjin ordered someone to go over, and the guard caught a young woman and brought her over. Years had passed since they parted, but that woman was still as weak and obedient as when they first met. She looked at Mu Hongjin with some fear and panic in her eyes. Mu Hongjin was stunned. It was Yushu. She subconsciously wanted to look for Lu Buwang. Since Yushu was here, Lu Buwang might also be here. However, Yushu seemed to know what she was thinking and blurted out, "He's not here." "Oh." Mu Hongjin looked at her and smiled meaningfully. Time would make a woman grow up quickly. Mu Hongjin was no longer the careless and silly girl who couldn't even distinguish her love rival. Of course, she understood where the hostility in the girl's eyes came from in the past, but Mu Hongjin had never regarded her as an opponent. She tilted her head, squatted down, and stared at Yushu's face with interest. "It doesn't matter if he's not here. After I catch you, he will naturally appear." Yushu's expression changed greatly. Mu Hongjin stood up with a cold expression. "Just say that a female assassin appeared in the temple and intended to assassinate me. The guard has already caught her." There was a red shadow at the corner of her eyes, which was exquisite and gorgeous. She was no longer the innocent girl with clear eyes. Mu Hongjin didn't return to the prince's mansion. She stayed in the temple and sent away all the guards and servants. She asked her husband to leave with her youngest son and waited for that person to appear alone. In the middle of the night, that person really appeared. After parting for many years, he seemed to have lost the innocence of his youth and became even more cold and unfamiliar. The first thing he said when he saw Mu Hongjin was not to ask her how she had been all these years, but to ask, "Where is Yushu?" He was emotionless, as if the two of them had always been unrelated strangers. Mu Hongjin lowered her head and wanted to laugh. She almost suspected that those days in the spring outside Jiang City were just her own imagination. She regarded Lu Buwang as a hero who suddenly appeared in her life, and Lu Buwang saw her as an accident that he didn't want to see. In prison. Her voice was also cold. Lu Buwang looked at her. He had changed a lot, and she was so unfamiliar with him. The girl in his memory was completely different from the girl in front of him, who was wearing a red robe and a golden crown and had a cold and arrogant expression. "It's impossible for Yushu to assassinate you." "Why not?" Mu Hongjin laughed sarcastically. "You can't judge a book by its cover. Besides, I don't know her. Let her go." Lu Buwang said, "Catch me." The way he looked at her was cold and emotionless, and there was no longer the helpless doting or annoying concession in the past. There was only the calmness of a stranger, and perhaps a little disgust for the bigwigs. How ridiculous. Why? Mu Hongjin took a step forward and just looked into his eyes. "She's just your junior sister. Why are you so protective of her? Do you like her?" She was just testing him. Mu Hongjin didn't know what she was expecting. Perhaps, she was expecting him to deny it quickly, then look at her and say, "You're the only one in my heart." What a vulgar scene. Mu Hongjin would spit in disgust when she saw it in the past, but now, she was looking forward to hearing it from his mouth. Unfortunately, a story was a story, and a legend was a fictional story. The love and infatuation in the world only increased resentment in the end. How many lovers turned against each other and how many couples disappeared? Lu Buwang said, "Yes." She said, "What did you say?" "I like her." The young man's voice was calm and direct. For a moment, Mu Hongjin felt that her fingers were trembling. Once upon a time, she also wanted to hear this sentence from Lu Buwang's mouth. For this sentence, she had used all kinds of tricks. Lu Buwang's mouth was very tight. She repeatedly got angry and felt that this person's mouth was made of sure too, and she couldn't pry it open no matter what. Now, he said it so easily. It turned out that it wasn't that she couldn't pry it open, but that the person talking to him wasn't her. She felt more and more ridiculous, and all the things that happened back then flashed through her mind one by one. When she was a carefree girl, she didn't see Yushu's feelings for Lu Buwang. When she was the princess of Mengji, she saw it, but she didn't take Yushu seriously. It turned out that they were in love with each other, and she was the one who was overestimating herself. What was the use of being the princess of Mengji? In love, she lost completely and didn't even have a chance to compete with him. And she had been thinking about him for so many years. "Back then, were you the one who told my father about what happened at the inn?" she asked. Lu Buwang said, "Yes." "When you left back then, did you never think of coming back?" "Yes." Mu Hongjin took a deep breath, as if she wanted to see it more clearly and feel the pain more thoroughly. She wanted to uproot something in the bottom of her heart and never look at it again. She asked, "Lu Buwang, have you never had feelings for me?" Lu Buwang's beautiful eyes stared at her, and his expression was as indifferent as a passerby's. He only said one word, "Yes." "I see." She murmured, and her eyes were a little hot, but she still raised the corners of her mouth and said, "Since you only love your junior sister, then you are willing to do anything for your junior sister?" Lu Buwang looked at her. "What do you want to do?" Mu Hongjin's fingers stroked his shoulder little by little, and her tone was ambiguous and frivolous. If you become my lover, I will let her go. Lu Buwang was very calm from the beginning to the end, and his expression didn't change. Only at this moment, as if he had been stung by something, he quickly took a step back and avoided Mu Hongjin's touch. Mu Hongjin's body stiffened, and the corners of her mouth curled up mockingly. Her tone was deliberately contemptuous. What, you don't want to? It's not everyone's good fortune to be the princess's lover. Lu Buwang stared at her. His white clothes were spotless, and the sword at his waist was shining. He was as noble as the first time they met. It was impossible for such an elegant person to accept such humiliation. She just wanted to humiliate him. Why did she take it to heart for so many years, but he could pretend that it didn't happen at all? What Lu Buwang couldn't do for her, he definitely couldn't do for Yushu. Otherwise, what would she, Mu Hongjin, become? A touchstone to prove their true love. Then, she saw Lu Buwang slowly kneel down in the dim temple hall and answer calmly, okay. Mu Hongjin's heart suddenly ached, and she almost couldn't breathe. What else did he want to prove? Enough, this was enough. She had asked clearly. Those doubts that had troubled her for many years and the results that she couldn't get, no matter whether they were good or bad, happy or sad, had all been answered. The women of Jiang dared to love and hate, and they were able to let go. The princess also had her own pride. She had the entire Jiang city, so why would she risk her life for a man? It was just an ill-fated relationship. She raised her chin and said coldly, but I'm not willing. How can a person like you stand by my side? Every word she said was like a knife cutting her heart. Even Mu Hongjin herself was surprised. It had only been a month, but why did she have such deep feelings for Lu Buwang? When she personally cut off this ill-fated relationship, she actually felt so reluctant to part with him. Take your sweetheart and get out of Jiang City, she said. Thank you, Your Highness. His voice was as calm as ever, and Mu Hongjin's tears fell in the darkness. You and I will go our separate ways. Lu Buwang, from now on, you and your little junior sister can never enter Jiang City. Otherwise, I will kill you every time I see you. The corners of the red robe drew a bright and brilliant ray of light in the dark night. It was like a clear boundary, indicating that the two of them would have nothing to do with each other from now on. It was also like the petals under the peach blossom tree when they first met. They spread all over the ground, dazzling people and making them lose themselves in spring dreams, unwilling to wake up. But there was always a time when one would wake up from a dream. She let Yushu go and returned to the prince's mansion, as if nothing had happened. She and the prince's husband were still in harmony, and the years were peaceful. However, even though they were married, it was still hard to calm down. A few years later, Prince Meng Ji passed away. Mu Hongjin gradually began to get busy. A few years later, the prince's husband also passed away, so she spent all her energy on her youngest son. Later, her son also passed away, leaving only Mu Xiaolu and her to rely on each other. Mu Xiaolu was very much like her when she was young. So she always doted on Mu Xiaolu, just like how her father doted on her when her brother was still alive. Mu Hongjin knew very well that once she took the position of the princess, the bright little girl who would sneak out of the mansion to play secretly would disappear one day. So before she disappeared, she wanted to take care of her and keep her alive for a while longer. She hoped that Mu Xiaolu could have her own story, and not be like her, who had wasted many years in vain in someone else's story. The apricot flowers on the branches bloomed in a lively and dense manner. The girls in the garden mistakenly entered the depths of the forest flowers and had a long and beautiful dream. This beautiful dream contained both happiness and sadness, but in the blink of an eye, it seemed like a lifetime had passed. Her spring day had died a long time ago. Perhaps it had never come. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.